Welcome to Nurturing Tiny Hearts, where Addie and I, Melanie, two moms navigating the twists and turns of parenting, embark on a journey of conscious and respectful parenting.
Join us as we share our experiences with me navigating the joys of new motherhood with my 5-month-old daughter.
And me, raising my 3-year-old daughter, all the while embracing our Montessori-inspired parenting style.
Together, we explore all things mommy related with warmth, honesty, and a touch of heart.
So grab a cup of tea, cozy up, and let's nurture our tiny hearts together.
Our journeys into motherhood are as unique as they are universal, and today we're opening up about the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
But what makes this episode truly special is that at the end, we'll be joined by our husbands to share their perspectives of our shared experience of becoming parents.
When Jason and I decided to get pregnant, it wasn't exactly like, oh yes, we're going to start trying or anything like that. It was, I had kind of gone back to being super Catholic, like not just like Catholic light, like I was growing up my whole life. And we were talking a lot about birth control in my girl Bible study group. And I told them I'd been on birth control since I was 15. And they were like, do you know like the effects of birth control on your body now? And like, there's not that much research on it. And I knew it had been doing stuff to me because I couldn't like know where my cycle was, or I would just be grumpy and angry, and like no matter what kind of birth control I had. Like I've done IUD, I've done the pill, and so like on and off, just switching off between those two. And I wanted to just see what I was like without it. And Jason was super supportive about it, and he was like, if we end up getting pregnant, we just end up getting pregnant, because we always wanted a big family anyway. We'd been married for 2 years at that point. So then in September I removed my IUD, and then in October we were like, let's actually try, because it was just kind of fun. And like those memes where women are like after their husbands when they're ovulating, that was totally me. I was like, come on, like let's totally like make a baby, it doesn't matter. Jason was like, stay away from me, you know, like but he was like, fine, we'll try it. And nothing happened in October. It was just one of those things. And then in November we went to Thanksgiving, and this lady, she like came with her 3 sick kids. So Jason and I got super, super sick. Like, oh my gosh, it was terrible. And what I was doing was natural family planning, and the method I use is ovulation sticks. So I would take ovulation sticks when I knew, like a couple days after my period, to kind of see like, okay, when am I going to ovulate? And I was doing that, but I kind of figured like, oh, I'm sick, maybe I'm just going to like ovulate late, or maybe I missed it during one of those like fever-induced dreams. Maybe I like didn't test or something and didn't see when I was going to ovulate. So I kind of was just like, hey, Jason, you want to hang out? I think I ovulated. I think we're good. I think we're
You tricked him.
And he was like, I mean, sure, why not, you know? And so we hung out, and like afterwards he was like, you're pregnant. And I was like, I think you're right, but we're going to wait. And so then we waited 2 weeks, and Jason, because of natural family planning, he knew when my like highs and lows were going to be of my hormones. So he was prepping the house. He was like cleaning everything. He was like making sure everything was perfect for my like supposedly my dip, right? Like when I was going to get my period. And I was just feeling super happy. I was just like, I feel really great. I don't feel like I want to like cry in a hole. And he was like, and I was like, I think I'm going to take a test. So I took a test, and it was very faint 2 lines. And I went to Jason and I was like, look, I'm pregnant. And he's like, no, they come like that.
Before you told him, did you text me, or did you text me after you had told him? Because I remember.
I texted you after I had told him.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he was like, it comes like this. And I was like, no, they don't come with 2 lines. And he's like, no, because it needs to be super dark. And I was like, I don't know. That's not how they work. But he was like, just slow your horses, because he didn't want me to get my hopes up or anything. Mm-hmm. So then the next day, I remember going to like the Smiths here, and it felt weird because, like, you know, when you're like a teenager, when you buy a test, you're like, oh God, I hope it's not like, you know, and you're like kind of embarrassed like to purchase something like I was like, it was weird to be actually buying a test and wanting a test. It was like a weird like feeling. Like
Yeah, wanting it to be positive. Yeah.
yeah, so I like bought it, like the fancy one, that like the one that's like electronic, no questions asked one, and it said pregnant on it, and so I was like, see, Jason, this one's like for sure Z's. And from then on, like I told you right away, I like texted most of my mom friends and stuff, and I knew in the back of my mind, like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, like, you never know, it may not like work out and stuff. But then like a month passed and it was Christmas, and we gave a card to his parents, like saying like, hey, you're gonna be grandparents and stuff. And his dad was like, I knew it, you didn't have wine last week, and you always have wine. So, like, and so then on New Year's we told our close friends, we would go to like a cabin every year, and we told them all, and I was like, next year at the cabin trip we're gonna have a baby, like, and they were super excited for us. But some of the girls were like, why are you telling people, like, you know, like, isn't it too early? And I was like, I think I'm fairly confident, but like if something happens, like, I think I'd like
You don't want to
be
if something happens, you don't want to be like alone and nobody knows
exactly.
what.
I was like, I don't want people.
You don't want to tell someone after the fact, like, I'm miscarrying and you didn't even know I was pregnant, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. So I was like, I'd like your support if something does happen, and I was pretty like good about it. And then as like everything started to progress, that first trimester was like a whole slew of like hormones. Like my birthday, which is January 3rd, was like shitty because we went to like teppanyaki. We call it Benihanas in California. They call it something different here in Utah. I don't know, where they cook in front of you. And I couldn't eat nothing but rice, and I was super puffy, and like my whole face is like swollen, and I just felt like super shitty. Did not feel good at all. And then like it got worse. Like the morning sickness got worse. I just didn't know how to eat in the middle of the night. I'm not a snacker. That's not my thing. So I had to like all of a sudden learn how to like eat crackers and stuff. Like there was one morning where I couldn't find the crackers we had just bought, and I like crawled to the bedroom and I was like, Jason, where are the crackers? And he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I can't. And like, you know, like I'm dry heaving, and I'm like, where are the cracks? And he was like, they're in the like closet. And I was like, no, they're not. So I was trying so hard to like survive those morning sicknesses and stuff. And then it like as like it got like as like towards the end of the first trimester, things were getting better, but my hormones were still all over the place. I was still feeling super guilty because like at work there had been somebody who had like miscarriages and stuff, and I just felt really uncomfortable mentioning that I was pregnant. Like I didn't want to shove that in her face, like,
yeah,
you know, or make her feel bad or make somebody else feel bad that like I'm pregnant and somebody else could be going through something else. And I also felt bad because I was like, I'm so lucky, like it's working out, it's, you know, first trimester, and you know the heartbeat's really good and everything's looking really great, but it's my first, like that's not, like, I guess I was just thinking it's not common or whatever. And so I felt super guilty like the first trimester into like the second half of the trimester and like second trimester and stuff. And like some people tried to make me feel better in like trying to make me disassociate to the baby, like just in case something did happen. Like they would call it a bundle of cells. And I was like, no, it's a baby. Like, I don't want to separate myself that much that I'm seeing it as like a biological cells thing. And
yeah, it's still your baby, you know?
Yeah. I was like, it's a baby. No. And like the way people would say it is like, you know, like they were like, don't get ahead of yourself. It's just a bundle of cells. And like that kind of always like annoyed me because I was like, it's not a bundle of cells. It's more than that. And it's like I feel it. Like I can't feel it, but I feel something within me that says like it's way more than that. So yeah, and that was my first trimester. How was your pregnancy?
Okay, so we'll go back a little bit, and it was in 2019 I was diagnosed with PCOS, and I knew that could potentially make it a little bit harder to get pregnant, especially because I hadn't had cycles in so many years. So after I got diagnosed, we decided that we would start trying, even though I didn't have a cycle at all. I looked into like a lot of things that I could do to like hopefully like regulate my hormones, and one of them was like I changed my diet a lot to just eating like protein, like meat protein and like plant protein, like any kind of protein and vegetables, and that's pretty much all. And then I got my cycle back, and we ended up conceiving, and I found out I was pregnant in February of 2020.
How long were
And
you
then-
and Kyle married before you guys decided to?
We were married for 4 years, and we were together for 7 by the time that we decided to start trying. And then I was pregnant, and sorry, my cat just threw up.
Isn't that wonderful? They choose the best timing. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, unfortunately, that ended in a miscarriage, which I want to talk about on another episode. So then we decided after we miscarried that we would keep trying, because you're supposedly supposed to be more fertile like afterwards. So I was hoping like, hey, I don't get like cycles, so maybe if we keep trying, we'll be lucky. Because I felt like it was a fluke the first time that I got pregnant, like, you know, because I didn't have periods, and then all of a sudden it didn't take quite as long as I thought it would before we got pregnant.
Right.
So we kept trying, and I didn't end up having any cycles after my miscarriage. And then after like 2 months after my miscarriage, I decided that I would take a test. So we had just moved from California to Wyoming, and I was sitting in like a short-term rental while we like looked for houses to buy, or like if we wanted to keep renting or whatever we wanted to do. So we were in a short-term rental, and Kyle was out, and I decided that there was literally nothing else to do, so I was just gonna take a test, even though I didn't think I was pregnant, and I honestly didn't really want to take a test, but I knew I had to like take a test if I'm not getting a cycle and we're trying. I need to like know, you know?
Yeah.
But I had already had like a negative test after the miscarriage, so it wasn't like, oh, I'm so excited to take this, hopefully I'm pregnant kind of thing. It was like a, well, I kind of have to do it to know if I am or not. So I took the test, I put it down on the counter. I wasn't like, let me look at it early or anything like that. I walked away for like a long time, and I only took digital tests. I never took like the line tests, because I
You
needed
don't want any
I
wiggle
needed
room.
definitive answers here, okay? I don't want to be staring at it and is that a
And
line?
like looking
I
at it
don't
in the
know.
light and being like,
Yeah, no.
Is it?
I just needed it to tell me yes or no. But I did know that like with the digital ones, if you test too early, like it won't say it. Like you could be pregnant, but it won't say it. So I walked away, and I was gone for a little bit, and then I came back and I turned it back over, and it said I was pregnant. And I'm not like an emotional person at all. I rarely ever cry. And I just started crying, but it wasn't like tears of happiness. It was tears of like, am I going to have to go through another miscarriage?
Yeah, you were scared.
And yeah, it was a lot. But I was also very like happy, like, hey, I did get pregnant again. Like, but I didn't think, I in the back of my mind, I thought like, okay, but like how long am I going to be pregnant this time? You know, like, am I going to get a little bit further than where I was last time? Because when I miscarried,
the joy away from it.
when I miscarried the first time, I was 12 weeks and 4 days. So I was so close to like out of the first trimester where you think like you're safe, you know? So I sat by myself for a little while, and I was like thinking, should I text Kyle to tell him? Like I really wanted to tell him, like that's all I wanted to tell him. But then I was like, no, I want to make it really special. So we decided to go for a drive after he got back, and I had my camera with me, so I was like, hey, I want to take a picture by those trees. Those are really pretty. Go stand over there. So I had him stand over there, and then I had the test like in my camera bag. And so when I was getting the camera out, I said, oh, wait, here, you forgot this. And then I handed it to him, and he was like, oh, we did it. And then I think he was kind of like lost for words there. So this time I didn't want to tell anybody until I was like farther along a little bit, like definitely out of the first trimester.
You didn't want to follow
So,
the same pattern. I mean,
yeah.
I'm a
'Cause,
kind of
like
a
I was
superstitious
just saying,
person.
yeah,
get
I
it.
like the first time, like I thought that I wouldn't want to be alone and like go through it alone, which I'm glad that like people knew I was pregnant, but then I never said like that I miscarried to like a lot of people. So I feel like there is no right thing to do when you are pregnant. Like announce early, announce late, whatever you want to do, because I've done it both ways. Like whatever you want to do, it's no matter what. When you miscarry, it's hard. So if you want support around you, like definitely do it. But if
Yeah.
you also don't want those questions, because they also hurt just as much as you're like miscarrying, like it's hard no matter what, you know?
Yeah, I think and
So,
some people really don't even talk about it. Like I know my mom has miscarried before me, and she's never really talked to me about it. And then my grandma separate situation was that it's not a miscarry, but she had a child that died young due to an accident, and like kind of erased their existence. Like photos gone, never mentioned it again. Like no one's like it's taboo to even like kind
yeah.
of mention and stuff. Like because yeah, superstition. Like I would have been superstitious too. I would have been like, if I do everything the same, it's gonna have the same outcome. So I have to do everything differently. Like,
Well, that wasn't really my thought when I was like, oh, I don't want to announce yet. My thought was like, I just can't. Like, I didn't even accept that it was gonna, like, how my pregnancy was gonna go. Like, in my head, I was like, oh, I'm gonna miscarry again, so I don't want to have to, like, do that
deal with
again.
that. Yeah, that's
So
that's
it
a lot.
wasn't like, oh, I want to do it differently because I'm gonna jinx it if I do it the same. It was like, I'm still not healed from the first one.
So after you told Kyle,
So
he
after
was
I
really
told,
excited.
he was very
And you didn't
excited.
tell anybody. So
We
then-
told Kyle's parents, I want to say like a couple of days later, because they actually moved to Wyoming at like the same time that we did. So we told them, and then I, I needed to call and set up a doctor's appointment with a new doctor since we had just moved here. So I did that, and when I called, they basically were like, how far along are you? When was the date of your last period? And I had to say, like, I miscarried on this date. They were like, okay, well, we don't have any openings for 8 weeks. So I was like, okay. So I had no idea how far along I was at all until my...
I feel like doctors are very unhelpful when it's the first early weeks too, because I remember going and I was like, I need, like, because we're type A, right? I was like, I need a list, like a checklist of like, when am I supposed to go in, like, for these like tests
It was a
and
little
stuff.
weird for me moving here and then being like, oh, here's your appointment for 8 weeks later. Because when I was pregnant the first time, immediately when I got my positive test, I called and I set up an appointment, and they wanted to. I also didn't have a date of my last period, so that probably also helped them be like, okay, let's get you in, because
Right, yeah.
that was like 3 months ago. So, but honestly, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second, but my experience with the doctors in California, compared to my doctor here, is so wildly different. It's just incredibly crazy. So I waited for the 8 weeks, and then I went to go to my first appointment. And in the small town that we live in, our hospital and our doctor's office is all like one building, and we have like different entrances for the emergency room, the hospital, and the like family medicine area. So I went in to meet my doctor, and I didn't want to go by myself, so I asked my mother-in-law to go with me because my husband was going to be at work.
Okay.
So she went with me, and I was really, really nervous because the last time I went to an OB appointment, it was like to make sure that I passed everything. So it was like not so good, not a good feeling. So I didn't want to like be alone, and I was convinced that they were like not going to be able to find the heartbeat, or I was going to get bad news or something like that. So I did not want to go alone. So she went with me, and I talked to my doctor, and she was so, so, so nice. The doctors in California, I saw like 3 different doctors when I was pregnant the first time, and because I had like 3 different appointments when I was pregnant, and they were all like, they had no compassion. Like even before I started to miscarry, they had no compassion. They were just very like clinical. they had no like care. It just seemed like you're just another patient, you know?
Because
And then
that's
even
it.
when I was miscarrying and they knew that I was miscarrying, th they didn't, there was no compassion. And I'm not saying that I wanted someone to like be like, oh, sweetie, you're going to be okay. But like they were very cold about it,
Yeah.
which I know I'm not the only person that's ever miscarried, but it was very, it was a lot. And
They separate themselves a lot.
mm-hmm.
I've
Which
noticed
I
that.
understand, but you can at least pretend to be compassionate, okay?
Yeah,
So my
they're
doctor,
overworked. The medical care is over there is like overworked,
yeah.
understaffed. Oh,
But here, it was wild. Like, she is just so compassionate, and it feels like you're talking to her. And then she brought out the Doppler, and she told me, like, hey, it might take me a second to find it, so don't freak out. And she actually found it really, really quickly. And I got to hear the baby's heartbeat, and it was so different than the last time. So I was like, okay, but, like, I don't want to get too excited, you know?
yeah.
So
Wait,
then she
how was
actually
it
told
different
me,
when you were first pregnant? Was the heartbeat different?
yeah, it was. I don't really want to talk about it like in this episode, but
Okay.
it was a different experience. Like just the amount of like compassion and like
Okay.
I'll talk about it in the other episode. So then she was like, okay, we need to get you in for an ultrasound so we can see like how far along you are. So she was like, okay, I'm gonna set you up an appointment, and the appointment's at this time, which was 2 hours from the current time. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. My husband will be off work by then.
That's
And then
so
we can
nice.
just
I live in the city, so when an appointment is like, oh, tomorrow, like the earliest is usually like tomorrow, not like
Well,
same
she
day.
felt bad. She was like, I'm sorry. The closest one is in like 2 hours. Like, yeah, she was like, this doesn't usually happen. And I was like,
I'm
it's fine.
That's not
I was
how
like,
that works.
my husband will be home by then. Like, that'll give me enough time. Like, you're good. So
Yeah.
then I went home and I waited for Kyle to come home, and then we went back and we got the ultrasound, and even the ultrasound was such a different experience. I ended up finding out that I was 12 weeks, 4 days, so I was the exact amount of time that I was when I miscarried last time. But it was so wild to see like my baby actually like moving around and having arms and legs and just getting to see them, you know? So that was wild. And I was excited, but I was also like, and it looked like a full-on baby. I was expecting to see like a little bean, you know, they talk about your first ultrasound like I saw with my first baby. But this one, it, like, actually had arms and legs and all that.
Yeah. I think that also because there's a lot of misconceptions of how it's supposed to look. Like I remember going to like this life museum, and the people we were with, they were like because it had like all the stages of life, and it was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? And like 2 weeks, it's like a bundle of cells, and then like rapidly, like 3 weeks, it has like it looks kind of like a gummy bear, and then it like rapidly
I was
changes.
expecting like a gummy bear or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how far along I was. So I'll talk about it more in like the miscarriage one, but the first time when I was pregnant, I did get like an early ultrasound, and it was just like a little gummy bear.
Gummy bear. Yeah,
And
the
then
little gummy
I
bears.
didn't get any ultrasounds after that, because you're supposed to wait like a certain amount of time, and I had
Yeah,
miscarried
it's
by
mind
then.
blowing how fast they grow. Like even though they're like
Yeah.
itty bitty, like they
So
look.
getting to see my child like at the same stage that I miscarried last time, it was also like completely like warping my mind, because I was like, wow, this is like what my baby looked like when I miscarried. So it was like bittersweet at the same time.
Right.
So then I took that ultrasound, and it was actually 2 days before my dad's birthday. So I was like, okay, well now I can tell my dad, but I'm going to wait for his birthday. So then I waited the 2 days, which was killing me. I had it on my fridge, and I was like, no, I could tell him a little early. And then I was like, no. I'm going to wait for his birthday.
Yeah.
So then first thing in the morning, I think it was like probably like 7 o'clock in the morning, as long as I could wait, I sent him a picture and I said, happy birthday, Grandpa. And he was so excited. And so that was nice. And then for the rest of my first trimester, which was only a couple of days, I had already felt a little nauseous before my appointment a few times, but I was like, am I just making up these symptoms to like convince myself that like I'm still pregnant? Am I like making it? But it wasn't even that bad. Like I threw up a couple of times, But then after my first appointment, it did get a little bit worse until like around 18 weeks. And I hate throwing up. I'll do anything to not throw up.
It's the worst.
But I could not control myself, and I did throw up a couple of times, and I hate throwing up. Like it was.
Dry heaving's the worst too.
But then you feel so much better, like instantly. I was like, okay, maybe it's not so bad in this case. But I only threw up a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel nauseous like too much, but I always tried to make sure that I was eating like an apple slice or something like every couple or like every hour. Not like a ton of food, not like a huge snack, just like a little bit. So maybe that's why. And I also had, I could do that. I was a stay-at-home wife, so I could eat when I wanted. I could rest when I needed to, which I was so sleepy in the first trimester. Even in like halfway through the second, I was never a napper, and suddenly I was a napper. I was so tired. I
Jason
needed
was
my
like,
nap.
"Are you okay?" And I was like,
No,
yeah. And
I'm building
I was
a
like,
human.
no, I'm building a human. No, he was like, "This is the fourth nap you've taken that's 2 hours long," and I was like, "Oh, has it? I'm going back to bed."
Yeah, I was never a napper, and it was so nice being able to like nap whenever I wanted.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it was so
worked
nice.
from home, so that was hard. So it was a little bit like I would be like in meetings, and then
You're
I'd be
like, there's my
"I'm
bed,
so tired."
but I can't go to it yet.
It was definitely like a lot of like I really just want to stay in here, and like and luckily everybody like people at work knew, so I was just like, I'm really tired and I'm really sorry. So it was pretty nice in that sense.
So that was my like
First
the
trimester?
beginning
Yeah,
of
the beginning.
yeah, the beginning of my pregnancy.
Second trimester for me, we moved forward with things pretty quickly. Like, I knew I wanted to do a birth center, and I didn't really care about the financial aspect of it. I was just like, I want a water birth. And for months before I had even gotten off birth control and stuff, I had already been talking to Jason's grandma. She's a nurse. And I was like, I don't think they let you do water births in Utah. And she's like, no, they do. She's like, you can have a water labor in the hospital, but you can't like deliver in the tub. And I was like, no, I want to deliver in the tub. I've always even wanted to give birth in the ocean. Like, if I could, I would totally do it at the beach in the ocean. But
So
apparently
you
that's
always
not
knew, like from a very young age, you always
yeah.
knew?
Yeah, I was obsessed with babies when I was a kid. Like, I would watch TLC, like the baby
Same.
show. I
Same.
love that show. It was so good. And I watched like
I was
water
like
births.
3 or 4 watching that. Like it was my favorite.
My grandma thought it was really weird. She's like, "Do you not want to watch like cartoons?" And I was like, "No, I like triplets being born." I like
Okay,
watching.
you totally like resurrected that memory for me because I forgot that I was so fascinated with like birth, and back then there wasn't like YouTube where you could watch a birth vlog, you know?
Yeah,
But
no, this was like documentary, like where they were like the conception, and then they had like they would talk about preeclampsia, they would talk about like a placental abruption, like they did all the talks and stuff like that, and they were like, this lady had 4 babies, like watch them grow, and like you would see the parents like look like total wrecks because
yeah.
I loved it. So I always knew I wanted a water birth. That was one thing that I've like was always fascinated me. And I knew that I wanted like an advocate. Like I knew I could possibly give birth in a hospital, but I just didn't feel like I could trust myself to like advocate for myself and say like I want this to be completely natural. Like I didn't want the option of pain relief there because I didn't want to like psych myself out or like have someone like subliminally convince me that I needed it. You know what I mean?
You didn't want to have a weak moment and be like, okay, give it to me.
Exactly. And I had been talking to Jason's grandma, and she was like, she made a joke. She was like, Utah has a lot of young mothers, and she's had a lot of mothers come in and be like, oh, I'm in labor, and they're like, okay, what's your birth plan? And the young mother will reply like, I'm just going to breathe through it or whatever. And she would be like, okay, give me a minute, and she'd like secretly call like the anesthesiologist, and she's like, we're gonna need an epidural in like 3 hours because she's like, if you don't have a birth plan, you don't have a chance. Like she said everybody that she had seen who did hypnobirthing had like the best natural births. So after that conversation, I bought this book called Holistic Hypnobirthing and started practicing that with Jason. And like downloaded the app that I preferred and everything, and we'll talk more about hypnobirthing in another episode. But I knew that that's what I wanted, was minimal observation, an advocate, and I definitely wanted like a completely natural water birth. And through the birth center is where we got to hear the first heartbeat. Jason came with me, and he put it to the song of like a different song that was going like 150 beats per minute. Like he chose a song specifically, and he was super excited. Like I felt really gross in the video. I was so puffy and stuff. I was like, I don't like this video, but men don't take great pictures usually. So
Ever, yeah, never.
Jason's really good at that. Of like. A lot of the photos on his phone, I'm like, why did you even take this picture? I look so bad. And he's like, no, you look great. No, you're lying to me. And then we decided to do a blood test to do the gender, because I didn't want to wait the 20 weeks. I'm such an impatient person. I wanted to nest right there and then. I was like, we're at
How
15
many
weeks.
how many weeks were you when you took the blood test?
I think I was 15 weeks. So
Because I asked about it, and my town is so tiny. They said we don't do that here, so I had to wait the full 20 weeks.
oh yeah, I would have not done it.
Torture,
Also,
absolutely torture.
yeah, I was like, 15 weeks. I already need to know. And
Did you have an inkling
Oh,
of
yeah.
like what gender?
Yeah. You know
Were
how
you
we
right?
announced it on Christmas? Everybody was doing their guess, and I was like, I think it's a girl. And Jason's mom was like, I think so too. Like, I think it is a girl too. And we were pretty certain it was a girl. So when they did the blood test, I was asking, like, some people are like, oh, the blood test was wrong. And she was like, it's really kind of impossible for it to be wrong because they're taking the DNA from the placenta.
Yeah, they're checking the chromosomes though. Like,
Yeah.
it's not gonna.
Yeah, she said the only
Especially
time-
at, like, I could understand at, like, 9 weeks, because some people do it in 9 weeks. I could understand. Then it could be wrong, but 15 weeks you should be.
You should be. Yeah, she was like, you're
You
pretty set at this about, like, you're at the range where we'll be able to know. But she did say that the only time she's ever seen it wrong is when it's a boy, but the placenta is a female, because it's taking the genetics from the mom, which is kind of wild. So, but that's the only time she's ever seen it. And so she's like, but most of the time it's right. We also wanted to take the blood test because even, like, we obviously don't want to proceed with any, like, termination if there were any issues, but we wanted to be prepared if there was, like, any special needs that needed to be done, so that I could, like, start talking to insurance or stuff and preparing for those kinds of things, and making adjustments, like if I needed to sell my house because it has stairs or something, like,
Yeah.
like I wanted to know if I had to do any of that. And luckily everything came back as, like, no issues and no chance of issues, like, so it came back as a girl, so we were right. And how we
Did
announced
Jason
it,
also think it was going to be a girl?
he also thought it was a girl too. He's like, yeah, he was pretty convinced it was a girl. He was like, I knew I was going to be a daddy, like a girl dad, And how we wanted to incorporate our dogs into it, so we got a lady to make cakes that our dogs could eat, so that they were able to, like, eat it, and they got to the center and it was pink. My dog Diesel did not understand the assignment. He was like, I've never been given, and they were big cakes. He was like, I've never been given a treat this big. He was like looking at us like, are you sure I'm allowed to eat it? Like, he was very confused.
He was like, you're tricking me and I'm going to get in trouble. He's like, why are these people putting their food on the floor today?
Yeah, they were like, he was like, this is wrong. And Nova, on the other hand, she was like, oh, finally. And she, like, shoved her face.
She's like, this is the treatment I've been waiting for.
Yeah, exactly. And the midwives were really awesome. Like, the compassion that you talked about, like, they were totally very compassionate. Like, I told them, like, I just can't figure out this food thing. I had lost 10 pounds. They would get firm with me when they needed to. Like, after my third appointment, they were like, Addie, you need to eat. Like, you need to, like, figure out the food thing. Like, this is not okay that you've lost 10 pounds. And I was like, I'm trying, I swear. And they would give me, like, recipes. And they were really, really like super nice about like worries and concerns. And I would tell them like silly jokes. Like I'd be like, this week on my list of new symptoms, more earwax. And they like they were like, okay, that's kind of silly, you know, like, but they'd laugh with me and stuff. And I really liked that because I think when you go to a big city with a big hospital, you don't always see the same person. And I've heard horror stories where like your doctor's not available for your labor and delivery.
Yeah, because they're on call, so
Yeah.
they rotate. Yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't want that. I wanted to know exactly who I was working with, and the birth center was really good about like, let's say they have 4 midwives that would do like the deliveries. They would make sure that at different appointments you got to meet them, so that way you got to know.
Well,
all of them.
usually in the hospital too, if you're like in an OB practice, generally they try to have you meet every single doctor that would be there. But yeah, I didn't have to worry about that in my little tiny town. Like I think there's like 3 OBs total in our town, and but the one that you're with is the one that you're with. Like
Right.
they will be on call for you. Like they'll know, like, okay, this one's gonna go into labor around this time, and they will show up. Like it's not gonna be a random person.
Yeah, that's yeah. I was just nervous like here in Utah, like and because I live in the big city too. So it was one of those things that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the tour I got of the birth center. It was like a big giant tub. They were like, they have a nice shower, which I was kind of like, it looks like a really nice shower. Maybe I'll like it. And then the tub was huge, and they had like balls you could sit on, like bars and stuff. And then the bed looked like an actual bed. It didn't look like a hospital bed. Like it looked like a made up bed. And
Was
I was
it
like,
comfy?
yeah. Oh yeah, super comfy, super comfy. And I asked about like how, like, do they have reduced tearing because they don't have people, you know, giving birth on their back? Could you bring in like music and candles? Can you make it like, and they were like, you can bring tea candles because obviously fire hazards and stuff. And they told us that like you can't be high risk. So the laws here are like, you can't be high risk. You can't have twins. And I was like kind of bummed because I would love to have twins one day naturally. And like, but
Does it run in your family?
No. I have one cousin that had twins, and
Sometimes you could be the anomaly.
I know.
Has to start somewhere, right?
They say if you eat a lot of yams, you can have twins, but I don't know if that's like in the real.
All I was eating the first time I got pregnant was yams. So
Yams,
and
maybe.
Yeah.
It helps with ovulation, from my understanding. I know that.
Yeah, that's exactly why I was eating all my yams. Maybe if I was like normal and actually ovulated normally, maybe I would have had twins. With how many yams I was eating, I would have had like quadruplets.
And then they don't do anatomy scans at the midwifery because they don't have the technology for that. So they did send me up to the university hospital to do that. And that was a lot
Is that
more
something
technical.
Is that something you can opt for or opt out of, or is it
I think
required in your state?
It is required in our state for the midwives to be able to make sure you're not high risk, that everything's going okay. Because they do need that one at least. They will read, like, if you're the type of person who doesn't want to get a bunch of ultrasounds, then you don't have to, but you are required to do the 20-week. So I did the 20-week one at the university, and it was a little more like lack of compassion. You know, like it was a little bit more like streamlined, like let's just get them in and out.
But they also can't tell you anything about your baby.
No, they can't. They didn't have a conversation with me when I was there, and I was going to pee my pants for sure. Like, oh my gosh, that was a hard ask. I was like drinking so much water. And Jason was in super big awe when he saw like the anatomy scan and everything.
Did you have an ultrasound before the 20-week one at all?
Yeah, I did ask them at the midwife, and they were like, our equipment's not great, so it's gonna look real fuzzy and stuff. So they like showed it to me, and it was like a marshmallow.
Yeah.
It's like,
and around how many weeks were you when you had that? The first
that
ultrasound?
one was 10 weeks. So it was just a little marshmallow, and I was like, I'll just wait for the 20-week for the real fancy machine to show me a little bit more.
It's crazy that within 2 weeks, like it goes from like a marshmallow to like a full-on baby.
Yeah.
Like when I announced my pregnancy with my daughter now, that first ultrasound was the 12 weeks, 4 days one, and full-on baby, head and everything. Crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. Like when we saw it, he was like, "Oh my gosh, it's like a full-on baby." Like he didn't know either. Like he didn't. We don't talk about that in classes where it's like, this is what it's going to look like at this time, you know. Mostly because I think there's like a disagreement on the weeks and what a baby looks like. And so after that, they did everything. She didn't want to show her left hand, which I was like, if she's born one-armed, that's fine. Like,
I love her anyway.
I love her anyway. They were like, you know, like she was, like the lady was chasing her with the ultrasound. She's like, she just won't show me her other arm. She's like, it's for sure a girl. So they showed us that bit, and then her face was huge. They were like, she's in the 90th percentile for head, and the rest of her body's 50th percentile, which I was like, perfect.
You're like, that's going to be great for birth.
And so it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it, and she was already head down, so she was already like in the perfect position. And later we found out why she was in that perfect position for the whole entire pregnancy. But yeah, that's pretty much how my second trimester ended. And then third trimester, I was just super active. I was walking, hiking, swimming. I felt good. I could finally eat again. Was eating a lot, drinking a lot of water, still sleeping a ton because I just got really comfortable with that. I had really bad tinnitus. I couldn't breathe out of my nose. That was the worst part of it all. And then, yeah, just was waiting for the day of her birth.
So for my whole pregnancy, I was high risk. So starting at 20 weeks, I started having weekly ultrasounds and weekly doctor's appointments. So I would go and I would have my ultrasound, and it was not like a simple ultrasound, like 5 seconds to like check the baby. It was like an anatomy scan, like checking like fluid levels, checking all this stuff. I would know like, oh, is her weight like increasing, decreasing, staying the same? The whole time she was in the 3%, so she was very tiny, which can happen with high blood pressure because your placenta can calcify, and then your baby doesn't get as many nutrients. She was actually, she had intrauterine growth restriction. So she was just really tiny for her weeks. So I would have my ultrasound, and then I would go directly to my appointment, and then we would do non-stress tests where they would like hook me up to monitors, and I would have to like press a button every time I felt a movement. I actually didn't feel very many movements my whole pregnancy. So that was great for my anxiety.
Did you have an inkling if it was a girl?
Always knew since I was very young that I was going to have a girl. I was going to only have one baby, and it was going to be a C-section. I don't know how I knew it, but there's a lot of things where I just have really strong intuition about things, and then it ends up happening. So
yeah, I feel the same way for a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So once we learned the gender, and oh my God, it was so hard to wait. So I had to wait 20 weeks, and then I got the gender in a little envelope, and I gave it to my mother-in-law, and I said that Kyle and I, we wanted to take, this is going to sound so redneck. Originally we were like, oh, let's get a balloon, fill it with like colored confetti, and then Kyle can shoot it. And then his mom was like, no, there's these like gender reveal things that you can shoot at that's like an actual like little ball target, and it like shoots out powder for like whatever gender. But you can buy it and it has both colors. So I was like, she was like, I could just fill it up. You can give me the envelope and I could just fill it up. And I was like, no, I don't want you to fill it up. I want you to find out with us. So,
I see.
So the day that I went to go get my ultrasound and they gave me the little envelope, his parents were actually moving in from their like short-term rental to the house that they bought. So obviously we weren't going to do it that day. So I had to wait another day. So I did wait. It was so hard, but I waited. And
You're
we
better
went,
than me.
and the shooting range so we have two shooting ranges. We have like a pistol range in town, and then at like the base of the mountain, we have a rifle range. And we went to the rifle range, and there's like never anybody ever there. But that day, there was like a whole group of people. So then we found out the gender, and that was really exciting. His parents did ask, like, what is the name? And my parents asked what the name was, and I instantly said, like, what the name was to them. But I was, like, very hesitant. But it was like, okay, now that we know the gender, I have to get it in my mind that, like, it's actually going to happen. At 28 weeks, she upped my medication. But I don't know if I knew what my blood pressure was or if I didn't, but they upped my medication. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm used to people upping my medication constantly, so it's not a new thing for me. So I was like, okay, whatever. Like, in my mind, like, my blood pressure's high. They'll just keep raising it until I have my baby, you know? Like, in my mind, that's how it worked, okay?
In my mind, that's how it would work too.
So
Just give me more pills.
then at 30 weeks, she started talking about how she wouldn't let me go past 38 weeks. Like I was definitely not going to go past 38 weeks.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And I just like thought like, oh, that's something that you have to tell your high risk patient. And she's not a high risk OB, so she was telling me that she had to consult with other, I don't know if she told me at this appointment or if it was like an appointment next, like after, but she had to consult with high risk OBs for if I had to deliver before 38 weeks. So at my hospital, I want to say they can't deliver before 37 weeks. I think I said 38 weeks originally, but I'm pretty sure it's 37 weeks. They can't deliver before that. And then if the next closest hospital, which is about like an hour away, they can deliver up to 35 weeks, I believe. So the goal was to at least get to 35 weeks, so I only had to go an hour away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the hospital that she kind of focused on telling me about. But she did like casually mention, oh, I'm talking to like a high risk OB in Montana as well for if we need to go that route. Yeah. But she didn't like emphasize it. So it was just kind of like in passing. I didn't take any like, there was no weight to her words. I don't know if that was just like wishful thinking for me or if she was just so casual about it. And then at 32 weeks, she upped my medication again. And I think at some point they told me to start taking baby aspirin to like prevent strokes and stuff like that. So they upped my medication again, but I wasn't really concerned because like I said, my blood pressure's high. They'll just keep upping it. I was like, whatever.
500 milligrams?
I thought in my mind the
2,000
only way that
milligrams.
I would deliver early was if I started having contractions.
Okay.
And I think I left this out when I was telling you before because I just remembered right now. Then after my 32-week appointment, I did feel like one really big movement. And I was like, this is the time. Like, I'm 32 weeks and I'm finally going to start feeling her move. I was in my kitchen cooking and all of a sudden I feel like some really big movements and I can see it. Like I could see like, I think like the hiccups and like little kicks. I couldn't really distinguish like kicks and hiccups. So maybe I was feeling kicks, but I thought they were hiccups because they were so little, like faint. So then I finally felt a big movement and I was like, this is what everybody's talking about. And it actually got really uncomfortable because something was in my rib. And the whole time I was, even at that ultrasound at 32 weeks, she was always head down, like in the perfect position from the moment that they saw her the first time at 12 weeks, 4 days to 32 weeks. She was head down.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it felt like there was something in my ribs and I was like, well, that's a little uncomfortable. But I got a little video. I was like, this is my first video. And I thought it was like of more to come. Like I would be able to like see more movements. Because I figured, okay, the closer I get to like my due date, the bigger the movements will get, right?
Right.
But I did know that I was high risk, so I did start to pack my hospital bag because we had talked about that a little bit at my 32-week appointment that she thought like I should pack a hospital bag just in case. So the day before my 33-week appointment, I packed my hospital bag. And I like washed all the cloth diapers, I washed all the laundry, everything was set up. Her crib was already built. So I packed the hospital bag, and then we went on a hike later that day. And I had noticed that I was hiking the whole time that I was pregnant, and I noticed that day that I wanted to keep hiking, but I felt like I needed to just like stop. Like I was maybe getting tired, but I attributed that to being like,
Being
oh, okay.
pregnant.
I'm like, I'm 32 weeks, almost 33 weeks. Like, that's just what it's like, when you're in your 30 something weeks, you start getting tired. And then my doctor did tell me at my last appointment, like, oh, look out for swelling and a few other things. And I did notice that, like, my wedding ring, usually it's, like, really loose on my finger. And, like, if I swing my hand hard enough, like, it'll just fall off. But it was kind of, like, getting, not stuck, but it was, like, I was swollen. Like, and I didn't realize how swollen I was until after. Like, I saw a couple of pictures of me that week, and I was like, wow, I was swollen, and nobody told me. So I did notice that, but I didn't think it was, like, anything to be too concerned about. And she did tell me, like, if you notice signs, like, call us, and we'll tell you to come in. But my appointment was the next day, so I didn't, like, think anything of it. And then usually every morning when my husband would go to work, he would go to work at, he would have to be at work by 4, and I would wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, make him breakfast, coffee, all that stuff. And then he would leave around like 3, so he would have an hour to get to work because he worked like quite a bit away. And that morning, I could not wake up. I told Kyle that I was like, I am so sorry, but I can't get up, so you're going to have to make your own breakfast, your own coffee. Call me when you get there. I'm going to be asleep until my appointment. And he's like, yeah, no biggie, like rest. And I figured like, oh, that's just because, today's 33 weeks that I'm pregnant. So, it's just a 33-week thing. I was like, it's just the more I get pregnant, the more uncomfortable I get, the more tired I'll get. Because you always hear that, and that you'll get swollen. So it's like, these are all normal things. So I wasn't worried. But then I had my alarms go off, and I was like, no, I'll get up in a few more minutes. Like, the hospital is so close to my house. I don't need to, like, rush myself. Usually I give myself way too much time to get somewhere, and I was always early to my appointments. So I was like, I could wait a few minutes. And then I was, like, sleeping, and then but it's not restful sleep because you know that you have to get up and you have to be somewhere.
Appointment and
Yeah, so then I finally got up, and I was like, okay, I need to eat something before I go. So I cut myself an apple, and I had a couple pieces, and then I left the rest for, like, when I come back home, I'll just eat it. Or my ultrasound was, like, an hour or two before my appointment this time. So I was like, oh, I can come back if I am really hungry. I'll just come back in between my appointments.
Yeah.
So then I left really quickly because I didn't want to be late, and I didn't say goodbye to my cats, which they are very important to me. So it like bothered me so much that I didn't say goodbye to them, but I was like, I'll be back in like an hour. It'll be fine. So then I walked really fast, and I got there, and we had my ultrasound, and we did like a 3D ultrasound. Pretty much most of the time we did like a regular ultrasound, and then at the end we would do like a 3D or 4D ultrasound, just because the ultrasound tech, unlike all the rest that I had ever like been to for like PCOS or like the first time I was pregnant, we had got to know each other quite well, you see. I was going there weekly for 13 weeks, so we were like, some would say besties at this point, So she's watched this baby grow with me. Every appointment she gets.
So sweet.
And I always felt really reassured because I was like, okay, at least I'm getting like once a week ultrasound so I can know that my baby's safe. So I would feel good like the day I got the ultrasound, my baby's safe. And then the next day I would be like, okay, she's safe. And then like throughout the rest of the week I'd be like, that appointment can't come fast enough because like, is she good? Is she really good? So, so we were doing like a 3D ultrasound, and she was like, oh, the fluid's a little low. And I was like, okay. Also, she had flipped breech, which is that really big movement that I was mentioning before that I felt that was not a kick. like I was hoping. It was her flipping all the way around. So she was breech, but she was like, it's fine. You're only 33 weeks today. Like, she has plenty of time to flip back over. So it was a good appointment, and she printed me out my pictures, and then I decided, I don't mind like just waiting in the waiting room until my appointment. I had a book with me anyway, so I was like, I'll just read whatever. I don't need to like walk all the way back and then come back again. So I checked in and I sat down to read my book, and I was texting Kyle like, oh, because I would always text him the updates at every ultrasound. I'd be like, oh, this is the new update. Usually there wasn't that many updates, but this week it was, oh, she's breached now, but we have time, and the fluid levels are a little bit low, but not too sure like what exactly that entails. She told me the number, but I just knew that it sounded low. I didn't know, and I don't know, like, obviously it wouldn't be good if you don't have enough fluid, but I didn't know, like, and I'm not a doctor. What do I know? And she didn't seem too concerned. So I was like, like, I'll get more info when I can ask more questions when I talk to my doctor. Luckily, she would like answer my questions. Like, it was a lot more like, she's not a doctor, so she can't really like tell you too much. And also, they're not really supposed to tell you like she probably shouldn't have told me the fluid level was a little low, or at least in California, that never would have happened. They would never would have told me anything. But she, like I said, we had become besties at this point. And so then I sat in the waiting room, I texted him, and then all of a sudden my name was called. And I was like, oh, cool. They must like, I'm here. I'm here every week. They're like, let's just get her in and out. Usually it was a very quick appointment. They would have me go in, they would weigh me, I gave my urine sample, I walked into the room, and usually they would have me do a non-stress test and hook me up to like all the monitors, have me press my button every time like the baby hiccuped or kicked or whatever. And then they would like check my blood pressure, then I would talk to my doctor, and then I was out of there. This time they just walked me into the room and they like and they were like, oh, we'll do like the non-stress test later. The doctor's going to come in and talk to you in a few minutes. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really think anything of it. And the doctor came in like really fast. And she always came in very fast. But this time it was like the door closed, the door opened. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said something along the lines of, there's protein in your urine, which indicates that you have preeclampsia. And I just like looked at her and I was just like kind of in shock. And I was like, okay. And then she said, I'm going to have this nurse, which it was always the same nurse every single time. So it was so nice because every single time I went in, it was the same exact people. So it felt like I was visiting like my family or friends. Like, yeah, it was so nice. And so she came in, she took my blood pressure, and it was high, obviously, but I wasn't allowed to, like, they had it turned away from me. She just said, oh, it's high. And then my doctor came right back in. And she said, okay, I've been talking to the OB, the high-risk OB in Montana, talking about your case and everything, and your fluid levels are low, like very low. So the doctor has made the decision that you need to be flown to Montana, and I will be handing you off to him. So she will no longer be like my doctor from this point on. And I just started crying, and I felt like the stupidest question ever to ask, but I was like, am I having my baby? And she said, well, you'll have to ask your high-risk OB. I will still be in contact with him, so I'll know like what's happening with you every step of the way, but I'm no longer your doctor. I'm going to have them wheel you to the ER. They're going to hook you up to some medication, and then you're going to fly to Montana. And I was like, okay. So then she was like, I'll be right back with the wheelchair. And I was like, okay. So then I took my phone. I don't remember if I called or texted Kyle. I want to say I called him. And he was at work and he answered. And I told him like, oh, I have preeclampsia. I'm going to be flown to Billings. And then I'm sure he asked like, are you having the baby? And I was like, I don't know.
You haven't told me.
I don't know. My doctor left the room. I'll answer those questions shortly for you. I do remember him asking if he needed to leave work right then, but he only had like a couple of hours left, and I didn't know how long the flight team was going to take or like anything from there. So I was like, let me call you back and give you, I have no information. All I know is I'm going to the ER right now, and I will call you when I have more information. So they wheeled me to the ER and they put me in the hospital bed and they gave me an IV, hooked me up to all these medications, and then they told me that the flight team was about like an hour and a half away. And then, so I called Kyle and I told him like, hey, just, you can leave work at your normal time. So then I told him, pick up the car seat, put it in the car, get the hospital bag that I just packed the other day, yesterday. I think it was like the day before. And then I waited for the flight team, and then they arrived, and they spent 3 hours stabilizing me enough to be able to be safe to fly, or safe enough to fly. And then I don't think I was even technically safe enough to fly, but they had already spent so many hours there that they just were like, well, it's not changing, so this is the best we're gonna get. We have
It's
to,
now or never.
yeah. So they put, this part is like a blur because the medication that they had me on, they told me it would like make me a little confused, and I'm sure it's also like the shock of everything happening and not expecting it to happen. Some things are very vivid, and then other things are a little bit more fuzzy. But then they put me in an ambulance and they drove me to like our town's airport. And then in the ambulance, I called Kyle and I said, hey, tell the cats I say goodbye, because I didn't even say goodbye to them. It was still a concern of mine. I was like, I didn't say goodbye to them. I don't know how long I'm going to be there, because all I know is I'm going to Montana, and it could be like a wait and watch thing. I knew that I wouldn't leave the hospital until I delivered, so that could be the next day. That could be like 5 more weeks of in the hospital. So I was like, tell the cats I say goodbye. And then he started his drive while I was flying. And then I got there, they put me in an ambulance, they took me to the hospital that I was going to be at. And then I waited to talk to the new high risk OB that I'd never met before, so I could ask him some questions, because I had no idea what was going to happen.
So for me, I kind of I will start by saying that the whole entire time I was told, hey, don't be surprised if you're going to be late past your due date. A lot of first timers with a normal pregnancy, not high risk, will be late and stuff. And I was kind of determined. I kind of like wanted her to be a little bit early, but that was just because I would just wanted to see her at that
Impatient.
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. So my entire pregnancy, I made sure to stay active. I knew that was the best thing to do. I wasn't like those other ladies. Like, kudos to them on the internet who are like power lifting and doing all that crazy stuff and pelvic floor and all that stuff. Like,
Once
no.
you hit your due date, did you do anything to try and induce labor? Like, did you do any walking? Like, I know that there's like curb walks that you could do, or bouncing on a
Yep.
ball. Did you do anything like that?
Yep, at 9 months I was swimming was one. That was what I was trying to do, was I was always swimming. That's like my favorite sport. Spicy food, which I tried, but the acid reflux
It
from
just
that.
gave you. That's something that I forgot to mention about being pregnant, is that for the first time in my life, did I have acid reflux when I was pregnant? And oh my gosh, is
It's
that
horrible.
terrible?
It's horrible. Were you sitting like sleeping sat up?
No, I didn't do anything to combat it, to be honest. I just lived with the misery.
That's
I
terrible.
I
No,
think it was
I
triggered
took
by
the
like, I was a very big like fruit person when I was pregnant. I mean, I'm
mm,
always a big fruit person, but all I wanted was fruit when I was pregnant. Like, that's all I wanted. So I think some of the fruits I was eating were very acidic, and that wouldn't help, you know?
yeah. I was eating a lot of a lot of proteins and stuff, so it was all coming back up at night.
I
So bad.
also I also forgot to, I know that you mentioned earlier in the episode that you couldn't eat a lot when you were in your like first and second trimester, I think, and then third you were fine. I had the opposite experience the whole time I was pregnant. My baby was very small, so I don't know if she was just in the right position for it. I don't know. But she was always very low too, so I don't understand. But I could not eat like I would have like two pieces of an apple and I'd feel full, and then I would have to eat like very small portions very frequently. It was so weird to me. I would get full off of like just the thought of food, to be honest.
I was eating all the time for sure. I was really enjoying my food. So, at my 40 weeks, or at 9 months, I was doing the stairs. I was doing everything that you could be recommended to do. And I was definitely pouncing on my husband as much as possible, to the point where he was just like, again, and like, questioning life and stuff. And finally, on like a couple days before my 40-week appointment, the week before at my 39-week appointment, I was like, what happened? Like, I was concerned. I was like, what would happen if I do go to 42 weeks and I have to go to the hospital? Like, would you guys still come with me? Would you guys be there to advocate with me? And they were like, we've had barely like anybody ever had to be transferred to the hospital being at 42 weeks. They're like, we would give you exercises to do. We're pretty good at making the baby come. Then at my 40-week appointment, I woke up pretty nauseous. Like, I was like extremely nauseous. I thought I had food poisoning. I literally was like, I must have eaten something off, because there was just like a knot in my belly and I wasn't hungry or anything. So I told the midwife, I was like, yeah, I'm just like not feeling it. I'm not feeling like I really want food, and I'm just feeling really nauseous and kind of gross. And she was like, oh, okay, and she kind of like gave me a side eye. I didn't know what that was about, but
Did you know that that's often a symptom of like
labor?
pre-labor?
No,
Okay.
had no clue. I was fully convinced I had food poisoning. Like, I
I
was
would
like, oh
probably think the
man.
same thing.
Yeah, I was like,
Even though I know that it's a symptom, I would chalk it up to, I ate something bad.
yeah, I ate something bad. I was totally convinced. Um, and I had already been off of 1 week of work already. And I had 20 weeks of maternity leave, which I was really excited about. A lot of people, don't have that luck in the United States. Most people complain about that. And I was like, I actually had a really long maternity leave. But then at the 8:30 p.m., the nausea really picked up to the point I was actually like dry heaving and puking, and it was awful. And I had on and off sleep until about 2:30 a.m. And then at 2:30 a.m., I was just like going back from the bathroom to the couch, from the bathroom to the couch. Like, it was just so awful. All I wanted to do was drink water with it staying down. I was so hungry because I hadn't eaten all day, so it was like so many emotions. And so I called the midwife because I'm still convinced that I am having some kind of food poisoning. And I call the midwife and I tell her, like, can you give me something that's pregnancy friendly so I can just keep water down at least, And then she's like, sounds like you are in labor. And I was like, no, that doesn't seem true. Because
Were
I
you
guess
having any contractions, or you couldn't tell because your belly hurt?
I couldn't tell because my belly hurt so bad from the puking. And then at 2:45, I woke up Jason because I had finally like kind of been able to distinguish the pre-labor pains from puking
Did
pains.
did the nausea and puking like stop at a certain point,
No.
or was that the whole time?
It pretty much stopped until I went into active labor, which wasn't until the morning, which was awful. So at 2:45, I woke up Jason and I was like, I think like I'm like it's time, but keep sleeping because I'm like the midwife said to hold off until I could not speak, essentially, through the pains. And so I tried ice chips, I did sips of water, and I was able to sleep in between like the contractions. And so what I started doing is I downloaded
What were
that.
you, what were your contractions, like the time between them at this point?
I downloaded this app which would tell you the average, and it told me I had like an 11-minute average. So I was like 9, 7, 11, like minutes in between each contraction. And those were like the exact times that I was sleeping. Like, I was able to sleep during those few minutes.
Were you feeling any anxiety or excitement or anything when you were like, okay, now I get to time my contractions? Or were you just
I
like,
was a little excited, but I was also really thirsty. I was kind of like a little peeved that it was going
did,
this way.
did any fear hit you at all?
No,
Were
no
you
fear.
afraid of
No.
anything?
No, I wasn't afraid at all. I was just more pissed about the lack of being able to hold down water. I don't know why I was so mad about that, but I just really was.
Because when you're thirsty,
Yes.
yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, I was tired and I was thirsty and I was like, please, like no more. So like at 5 a.m. I called the midwife again and she again was like, call me back when you can't speak. And I was like, okay, fine. I just want water. I just wanted some kind of medication to help me with the keeping like food down because she did tell me on the phone they have something for that, but they're only going to give it to me when I'm at the birth center. And so the contraction average changed to like 8
Did you
minutes.
try any like ice or anything? Did you try sucking on ice to get water?
I did try sucking on ice, and that helped a little bit because it was so little. And then at 5 a.m., I woke up Jason right after that phone call with the midwife, and I was like, she told me to call when I can't talk, so just hang out with me. So we put on TV, and we were doing the timing, and the contractions were 8 minutes average, 5, 6, 7, 11, 8, like it was everywhere.
What day of the week did you go into labor? Was it like,
Tuesday.
okay,
Tuesday
so
morning.
did he have to work that day? Did he have to call out like,
Yeah, he
hey,
called
no, I've
out, but
seen
they
labor?
they were already like, "Hey,
Expecting it,
let
yeah.
us know,"
I was just wondering
and
if it was like a weekend or what, because I don't remember.
no. Yeah, it was a Tuesday. It was a random Tuesday. So I'm glad I was already off work because I would have that would have been a whole thing, but not because my work would have been like don't miss work, but it would just been like because I'm a recruiter, I would have had to cancel a bunch of calls and a bunch of other things and like it would have just been a hassle. So I'm glad I was already off. At 7:30 a.m., I made Jason call because I was like, I'm so sick of not having water. I can still talk through these contractions, but I kind of chalked it up to like we trained so well with hypnobirthing the whole entire birth that I was just able to breathe through them, and so that's why I was still able to quote unquote talk, even though I was like 4 minutes apart with my contractions at that point. So she said, okay, well, come in at 8:30, and they were really hesitant about having me come in because since it's my first baby, most labors are pretty long for first-time mothers, and there's a time limit at the birth center of 12 hours. They limit that because it can be high risk after 12 hours of a mother going in quote unquote active labor. Like legally, that's what like they're seen as. If you're in a birth center, you are in active labor, even though the midwives may know that you're not in active labor. That's just legally how they have to report it. So they had me come in at 8:30 a.m. Jason, I was counting down the minutes. Like we left at exactly 8:15 a.m. because we're 15 minutes away from the birth center. I was like, get me out of here. So we got the our bag that I had packed, the camera, my music, my headphones, the hypnobirthing book I wanted to make sure we had just in case I needed some inspiration or something. And then we told his mom to come so that she could take care of the animals. Maybe she needed to take care of them all day. Who knows? And we arrived there at 8:30 a.m. and they let me hang out for about 2 hours because they had another labor going on next door. So they were like, okay, we'll hang out here and we'll come back soon. And when they came back, they were talking amongst themselves and they were like, yeah, this is her first baby. She seems to be here early, but let's maybe ask her if she wants to do a dilation check. And they knew I had a photographer, so they also told me like, let's just do a dilation check to make sure to see how far along you are, because we'll send you home if you're not super far along, and that way you know when to tell your photographer to come too, because she was about 20 minutes away. And I was like, okay. So they did a dilation check and they were like, wow, you're already 8 centimeters along. And I was like, I know. Like, I know this. So I I am super surprised by that. The photographer gets there. So they check me out at 10:30 a.m. and then the photographer gets there about 11:30 a.m. And I've just been walking around and just kind of setting things up, like setting up my music and different things like that. And they suggest, like, at 11:30, they're like, how about you go into like the shower and like see if you like the shower and stuff. And I personally do not like showers. I don't, they give me a lot of anxiety. I don't like splashing on my face. I'm from California. I don't like wasting water. So like just standing in a shower pointlessly without like, oh, I'm going to wash my hair, face or something. I didn't want to do that, but I was like, sure, why not? One of the reasons I signed up for the birth center was because maybe I would like the shower and because it's not out of my pocket.
Yeah. When I was miscarrying, one of the like big things that I did, because when you are miscarrying, you are having like contractions, because I went in the shower and that helped so much for me.
Yeah, I did not like it. And there was like a chair in there that you could sit on, but when I sat down, she was already so low, like there, that I could feel like I was pushing her up, and I was like, no, I don't like that either. So like, I was like, I don't want to do that. But right before I got into the shower, my water actually did break. And they tested it too, and they were like, you really are far along. Like the fact that you're 8 centimeters, your water's broken, you're progressing really quickly and pretty quickly as well. So I hated the shower. It lasted maybe 15 minutes in there, which is a pretty long shower for my standards. Like that's really long. And so then I told them I think I'm ready to get into the tub, and they had the tub ready by 11:55 a.m. And I know this because I was looking at my photography photos of the birth, and that's when I got into the tub. Jason turned on my music playlist, which I had been working on for a long time. It was called my mermaid playlist, because that's what I considered my daughter was, a little mermaid. And that's because she was going to be born in the water. So I was like, she's going to be my little mermaid. And we continued with the hypnobirthing that we were practicing. Jason was rubbing my back. He was making sure that I was following my instincts. I would groan and moan, not scream or anything like that. Everything to make sure that I was calm. The midwives were talking about like, this is where you're at, this is what's going to come next. Prepare yourself mentally when you do start wanting to push. They kept giving me water. They put cold compresses on my head. It was wonderful. Every time they put like a new rag on my head that was nice and cold, I was like, I was in heaven. And I was basically in a trance. I couldn't tell that people were moving around me. I couldn't hear the photographer. It was just me, Jason, and the midwife. That was it. And the water. And they didn't have to coach me. There was no point where I had like I can't do this. I kept thinking every single pain is just closer to seeing my baby. I kept imagining my favorite line from Ina May's Birth Stories, which is imagining a cave where water would fill and then release and go back. Like I would follow that as my contraction. So I was totally able to know like, okay, a contraction's coming, to like not brace myself, but to like start blowing out, not letting my jaw clench or anything. And then I would be able to moan away while it like released. And it was
On a
pretty
scale
pretty
of
easy.
1 to 10, what would you say your contractions were for you?
I would say a 5. Like worst pain I've ever felt, 10, like breaking a bone, to 1 like a toothache, I guess. A 5, like in the middle of that. So
And do
like
you have a high pain tolerance generally?
I I generally do have a higher pain tolerance, but I also think it was just I knew that it had a purpose. This pain has a purpose. You know, like breaking a bone sucks because it's an accident. It shouldn't have happened, and that kind of stuff makes me mad. But like knowing it had a purpose was comfortable for me. So I kept thinking like your body's made to do this. You know, you're about to see your God's greatest gift. Every single pain, you're closer and closer to seeing your baby. So I just kept thinking that. And at one point, I said, I think I need to be, because I was leaning back on Jason, and at one point leaning forward, and then when I was leaning back on Jason, I said, I think I need gravity. I went on my knees, and like the midwives were like, look at you listening to your instincts. And so I went on my knees, and the midwife grabbed my hands and she gave me tension so I could pull. And I was like, I need to push now. And so I started to feel like I needed to push, but I was really trying not to push because I had read so many stories of women who their bodies can just naturally eject, essentially. And so I wanted that because I did not want to tear a lot. I knew it was possible it was going to tear. I hadn't done any of the exercises to not tear because one, the tool is very expensive, and three, my partner was like, that seems real odd, not my thing. And so and I was like, okay. So she's pulling and I'm trying to resist pushing, but it's really hard to resist pushing. I realized that pretty quickly. So I kind of just let myself do a form of pushing, but I wasn't going to like poop my pants pushing. Like I was like, I'm not going to turn, I don't want to do that.
Did you poop?
No, because I had nothing in my belly. So I was pretty lucky there. But fun fact for the people who do want to do a water birth and are like worried about that, the midwives have like little fishnets and they scoop those kinds of things out really quickly, like so that it's not in the pictures, so that it's not touching anybody, and then they'll drain the tub consistently throughout the birth to make sure that it's as clean as possible too for the birth of your baby. And so then at 1:30 p.m., continuing the same pulling and tension, and Jason just motivating in my ear, repeating the same things that we had practiced, and like reminding me that I'm just a warrior and a badass and that I was doing everything like amazingly. He was able to catch our baby girl as she came out of me at 1:30 p.m. and they helped her come out, and she was kind of on my chest. We didn't know this at the time, but I had a really short umbilical cord, so I was kind of like leaning forward because I couldn't really like put her all the way up. So it was like a lot of leaning forward and holding her, and she had her eyes open and she was looking around, and the midwives were like, okay baby, like starting to rub her with like a cloth. You need to make some noise, and she like, it looked like she was holding her breath, like you could tell like she had her like cheeks
She
filled,
didn't
like,
realize she was out yet.
yeah, she was like, I don't know what's happening because of the water and stuff. And so they had like the little air pump ready just in case. And then she started to cry when they like, I think they like rubbed her little back or something. I don't remember because I was kind of in a trance. And then I wanted delayed cord clamping, and I didn't want them to bathe her, so we got to hang out in the tub for a good while her cord turned white, and we were just in there. At one point she started to cry, and I put my rosary over her, and she stopped crying, and Jason and I both prayed
That
over
made for a
her.
beautiful picture, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a beautiful picture. And she stopped crying, and Jason and I prayed over her, and we were listening to music, and I think I was singing along. I don't remember if I did sing along to stuff, but I was singing along, I think. And we just got to see her beautiful face, and we were just hanging out in the tub. And then at one point, they were like, okay, we're going to go ahead and pull you out of the tub. And we'll because her cord is white, let's go ahead and just start the process. I believe that Jason cut the cord. I can't remember. He'll be able to tell us if he did. And they laid me down on the nice fancy bed was talking about, right? Like that looks like a bed. They had like stuff on there for like the bleeding, so they like set me up so that I could be comfortable. They had me latch her so that she could start feeding right away, because that also helps with delivering the placenta, is her feeding, because I guess it causes contractions when you first feed.
So you delivered your placenta when you were already in the bed.
Not yet. So they had me lay on the bed, and then they had Jason. They were like, hey, we're going to have her deliver the placenta now. How about you go shower? So they told him to go to the shower. And they were like working on me and stuff like that. And I think Jason took a pretty fast shower. because
And you were still holding the baby
I was
while,
still holding the baby. I was still feeding her
did
and
you
everything.
have to do anything when you were delivering the
The
placenta?
placenta, they said just feeding her would cause the contractions. So they were like, let's make sure you have a good latch. So they were doing
Did
that
they press on your belly or anything like that?
a
Or
little
did it
bit.
just
They were
kind of
like,
do it itself?
they pressed on my belly a little bit because they were like, we're going to do some of these massages. They told me like it might hurt, it might be uncomfortable, but I was so in awe of the baby. I was just like,
Hmm.
whatever you want to do, whatever you have to do, I don't care. As Jason steps out of the shower and comes out of the bathroom, they had like this bowl to catch the placenta, like at my the base of my legs and stuff.
Because you were
And
gonna encapsulate it, right?
yeah, because I was going to encapsulate it, and they have to look at it and make sure that it's whole and that nothing's left. So they do like put it in a bowl and like then look it in the light and stuff like that.
Did you look
Um,
at it?
oh yeah, it was beautiful. It looked like a tree of life. It was beautiful. And so when he steps out of the shower, I feel the placenta rush, but then I hear kind of like a splash, like too much of a splash. And Jason told me that it was like, imagine the biggest mixing bowl you can filled with blood. And they were like, you are bleeding out, you're hemorrhaging. Like, you're not clotting like you're supposed to.
I'm getting chills, and I've heard this part before.
And they were like, so we're going to give you pit, pitocin,
Pitocin.
pitocin. Thank you.
Pitocin.
Pitocin to help with the contractions to help you clot, and they're running fast, like they're explaining to me very sternly, they're explaining this very quickly to me. I was an EMT, so I was just kind of like, okay, do what you need to do, you don't really have to explain it to me. I trust them at this point. And so they gave me 3 doses of pitocin. They put an IV in so that they could give me fluids. They missed initially here like 2 times, so I bruised pretty bad afterwards, and then they finally were able to get it here. And they were like kind of over me, like when they were like doing the IV, they were like on top of the bed, like over me, like trying to get all of this stuff going, and I was just in a trance and probably had a little bit of blood loss. I mean, I had a lot of blood loss, so I was kind of dozed. So I was definitely like, oh, beautiful baby, and everybody's like running around and going crazy over me. And then Jason, and then like you could tell the midwife was worried, and so Jason asked her like, what can I do? And she said, well, we need somebody to call 911. We're gonna get the EMTs here because she might need to go to the hospital, and it's best to have them here sooner than later. So after 3 shots of pitocin, one of the other midwives called 911. Jason felt helpless because somebody took that task away from him. And then when he asked again, like, what can I do? The midwife told him, pray. And you could see like all the color leave Jason's face. Like he was so stressed and so worried. And I could tell that he was really stressed. So I like looked at him and I was like, I'm fine. It's like I felt fine. Like I really didn't feel like something awful was happening that was life threatening.
And you didn't pass out or lose
No, I
consciousness or
didn't pass
anything
out.
like
I didn't
that.
feel dizzy. Like they kept asking me, like, "Are you dizzy? Are you Like, How are you feeling?" I'm like, "I'm feeling good." Um, I didn't know I was kind of delirious until the EMT came in, and Jason went outside and stepped out and called his mom, and he was like, "I need you here." And he was like, "I think something we might be getting transferred to the hospital, whatever." And she was like, "Where do you need me?" And he's like, "Just let's wait, and I'll tell you where I need you." The EMT came in, and I'm telling you, 6'5" EMT, bald guy, handlebar mustache, like curled, like totally curled, and that's when everybody realized I was delirious because I was like, "You're so big." Like the
The
minute
way
he
you
stepped away.
describe him always makes me think of the SpongeBob character. You know
I'm
what I'm talking
telling you.
about?
Yes, yes, from the I'm a man episode, right? Yeah, no, definitely like that big old Popeye guy too, like I was just like, what is this guy? And he comes in and and he gets the information from the midwives, and then he just like punches my gut, like full on punches my gut. And he's like, "How are you feeling?" And I was like, "You you just punched my gut." And he's like massaging my gut like with his like big old Popeye hands and stuff because he's trying to get enough pressure to like make it clot and stuff. And the midwives are like, that's working. She's starting to clot. The blood is slowing down. And they're like, works every time. I was like, punching me in the gut works every time.
Did you have a chance to ask him how many other people he's punched in the gut after?
I was so out of it. I was so upset too because the Pitocin, when it kicks in, because I had 3 doses, which is like, I'm sure an unreasonable amount. I don't know how many to induce labor you'd need, but I was just shivering, which I hate shivering. I felt so cold. The room was like at 95 degrees. I hated like the uncontrollable contractions because you can't like feel them coming or anything like that.
Since you gave birth naked, were you still fully naked at this
Oh
point?
yeah, I was totally naked, and
No wonder
this,
you were cold.
oh yeah, yeah. And like, I had a ton of blankets on me, but I had my boobs out because I was feeding my baby. But when the big old EMT came in, like 4 other EMTs plus firefighters came in, and he was like, "Let's cover you up," because they were like all kind of staring, and I was like, "I don't care." Like I just did not care. I was like, they have a purpose for feeding my baby. I don't know why it's a big deal. Y'all are in the medical field, whatever, but it's Utah, so take what you will from that. And so, like, yeah, the Pitocin was not making me a happy camper. I was just more than anything cold and hated the shivering and hated the uncontrollable, like, contractions. But all of that was leading to me being able to clot, and the bleeding was slowing down. And I told you this before, but I kind of knew something was wrong with like my clotting ability because a week before I had cut like something on my thumb, and it took literally 3 hours for this small cut to stop like profusely bleeding. Like something was off.
Did you mention that at all at any of your appointments?
No,
It just
because
didn't really cross your
yeah,
mind at that moment.
yeah, because I was like, oh, it just must be because I'm anemic. Like I was anemic towards the end of my pregnancy, and I was taking iron supplements, and I was like, it must be related to that. But I didn't think it would have affected my birth and stuff. And then so when that all finished, they were all done being worried. They were like, we don't need to transfer you to the hospital, which I was really grateful for, mostly because you know how expensive ambulance rides are. So I was kind of like, I don't want to. I was almost about to be like, I will go in my own car and bleed all over my own car. I was like, Jason can just put me in the back. But so luckily the clotting ended and stuff, and they were able to leave. And what was really cool is that EMT, that SpongeBob character EMT, he had all his babies be born there. So he actually knew the facility, and he knew what the routine was there. So it was kind of cool.
You should have asked if he also had to punch his wife in the gut at any point.
I know. It's like, did she hemorrhage? Did she have to get it? So once that was over, it really slowed down. It was really quite quick, in my opinion. I think it was probably like 35 minutes of all this craziness. Like the EMTs were there within 2 minutes.
Which I'm sure felt like hours to Jason.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And he was so like, there's a couple pictures that we have where you can like, he's laying his head down because I think he like truly imagined that I was going to like pass away. And that I can't imagine like the thoughts that were going through his mind. And so after that, his mom came, and she got to hold the baby, got to see the baby, and then we were able to all cuddle with the baby once she was fed and she was sleepy and stuff, and we were just looking at her. And that's when I quickly realized, because they asked me, they were like, do you have PJs for her? And I was like, I have a tank top for her.
You also have to mention what month she was born, even though, yes, she's a newborn.
It is August, end of August. So
it's not like you're in the middle of winter.
No.
So, and you're a first-time mom, so what do we know?
Yep. And then they were like, do you have a swaddle for her? And I was like, I did not pack properly for this.
Well,
like,
what do you need a swaddle for if you're going to take her home?
Because they wanted to wrap her afterwards, after they had done the footprints and stuff. They were like, if you're gonna, because they do hold you there until you pee. So they were like, we want to swaddle her until you go to the bathroom. They were like, we want to make sure that you can go to the bathroom before we send you home. And they give you like a kit and stuff. They like, they give you all the post-op instructions. And so, but they want the baby swaddled during that time. I
Do
was like,
they have all the things like you always hear that if you give birth in a hospital, like you don't need to pack anything like nipple butter, like postpartum things for yourself,
yeah,
diapers, anything like that. They have all of that
yeah,
there.
they had everything. They gave me like a whole entire little like goodie bag of things and stuff, and I had all my stuff at home too.
Hmm.
Like that was a little more fancy and stuff. I had bought those things because I did want like a little bit more fancier things and stuff, and so
Yeah,
I had
first
put it on
time
my
mom, you
registry.
want all the
All the
things. You're
stuff,
gonna
all the
spoil
things.
yours,
Yeah.
and really, it's for yourself. It's not even for the baby. You're
No,
spoiling yourself.
I was pretty good about spoiling myself. And so we got to hang out there, and then they were like, "Well, we need you to pee," but I was dehydrated at that. I was still dehydrated even after I had the IV fluids because of the puking from the night before. So I really didn't have that much in me. And then they were like, "Okay, well, you've been here for a while. We don't want you to reach your 12 hours. How about we just give you a catheter?" So they did give me a catheter. Oh, and I did tear like a tiny, tiny bit. So they gave me
Did
like
they
two
have to
stitches.
do an? Okay, I was gonna say, did they have
Two
to do
stitches.
anything for that?
Two little stitches, which that hurt more than the birth. I hated the the numbing injection they had to give me.
So probably like lidocaine or something
Lidocaine,
like that.
yeah, that hurt way more than the birth. Like I was like, no, that's terrible.
Yeah, I would imagine it's pretty sensitive after
Yeah,
what you just.
I was like, that's god awful.
You
No,
have to mention. I think you mentioned what time she was born, but how much did she weigh and what was her length?
she was 8 pounds 21 inches. She was a pretty long baby, and she had a 90th percentile head.
So no wonder
So
you were a little sensitive.
yeah, she had a big old head. My friend just had a baby, and I was like, your baby has a tiny head. My baby was like a
Scarlett?
bubble.
Yeah, I'll tell you about this. Remind me, ask me when I tell you the rest of my birth story how big Scarlett's head was, okay? And I'll
Okay.
tell you.
And so we finished up there. They gave me the catheter. They sent me home. And to me, it felt like everything was going great. When I forgot my own pants. I didn't pack my own pants. I packed a shirt. So Jason was able to lend me his sweats, and he just came
And
home
here
and
I
was
was
like,
thinking I was the minimal packer.
minimal means you pack the necessities. I apparently was just like, I don't know what I packed. I like looking back now. I did not
Well,
pack
you'll know for
properly.
next time. You'll know for next
Yes,
time.
true.
You'll
Um,
you'll have a list. Did
yeah,
you have a list when you were
I did
packing, or
have a list. I have no idea what the heck I did. I don't know.
maybe you thought you
I'm
saw
actually, I think everything was in there, but I had stuffed it so good that when we were ready to go, we couldn't find everything. So that's probably what happened. Because I did follow the list. I think I just
Yeah.
like
So you
tucked
probably did
everything.
pack it. You just, I mean, it was a
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
day. So,
Yes. So it's just like I just wanted to get out of there, so I must have
so
just
what
like
did
I
you
was
wear
like
home?
I wore Jason's sweats, my t-shirt, and the baby wore a tank top onesie. Tank top onesie, yeah. So
Did you
that was
have a
good.
baby blanket with you or anything like that
Yes, we
for like,
luckily did have a baby blanket.
so it's not that bad. And what
No,
was the temperature outside during that particular day? No, I'm
it was
just
like
kidding.
85. It was 85. It was a
So it
good day.
wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, like newborns are usually cold, but I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. No, and once we got home, I had her in pants and like
yeah.
a good
And
long sleeve
I'm sure
onesie. It's
your
dirty.
car was nice and warm too. So
Yeah.
it's not like you were taking her out in December with a tank top, you know? So
Yeah.
it's not that bad.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I still felt bad though because I do think I wished I had gotten more like newborn stuff. Like people really avoid giving you newborn things because they're like it's not gonna
But then
last
they always tell you not to buy your own because you're going to get so
so
much.
much. Yeah, you want like I got so much stuff that was 3 months, nothing for like one thing for 0 months, and two to three things for 3 to 6 months. Yeah. So we got home, and I thought everything was good. And we'll continue this story in our postpartum podcast of how everything was not good.
Which I think is going to be our next one, right?
Yeah, that'll be our next one.
That would make the most sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it my turn? Well, I do want to say I am so glad that you're okay.
Yes. I
Every
am
time
so glad I'm so okay.
every time I hear you say like you hemorrhaging, I Like it makes me want to cry and I get like goosebumps and everything. Like
It was scary for a lot of reasons, and post that it was scary for me because mostly because
yeah,
I
it
was like,
probably set in afterwards.
yeah, and also because I was like, does this mean I'm high risk now for like future pregnancies? And the
Well,
midwife
they can
assured me
give
like,
you
no.
medication to make
Yeah.
sure that you can clot and stuff like that.
Yeah, she was like,
So,
no, next time just tell your, if you choose to go outside of the midwifery, just let them know like you hemorrhaged in your past pregnancy and that, and then they'll be more prepared. And so that made me feel better because I was worried about that. So yeah. So tell me about your birth story. So we
okay.
finished off that you were being
I
flighted.
had just arrived at the hospital in Montana, and I was waiting for my OB, my new high risk OB, to come in. And he was new to me, but the whole time my doctor was talking to, like, I think when she started getting concerned about my blood pressure or like having to raise it, and started talking to me about like, if we have to deliver, these are the hospitals that you're going to go to. So this doctor knew a more than I didn't know anything about him, but he knew about me by that point. And so I waited for him, and it felt like a really long time, but I just wanted my questions answered. Like, what's the plan going forward? I had no answers. I didn't know, am I going to be here for 5 weeks? Am I delivering tonight? I'm also starving at this point because at this point it's like 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and I haven't had anything to eat since those two apple slices in the morning. So at this point, I'm starving, and I just want to know what's going to happen. I don't like uncertainty, so it felt like forever before he came in. But then he came in, and he was so calm, and he sat down on the little like couch thing that's for because I was in the labor delivery rooms. So he sat down in the little couch that is like generally the partner's sleep space.
And Kyle hadn't made it yet.
No, he
You were
was not
you
there yet.
okay.
He was on his way. It was quite a long drive because he had to go from where he worked, which was closer to Montana than where we lived. So he had to drive back home and then drive all the way back as well. So he sat down and he was sitting on the little couch sleep space. He had his legs crossed, his arms behind his head, just relaxed as he's talking to me. He's doing small talk, and I'm like, okay, like I'm not very good with small talk in general, but I really want to answer some of my questions.
Yeah.
So I did the small talk for a second, and then I was like, okay, so what's the plan? And I said it like as nice. I wasn't. I used to be very timid, like I wasn't quite great at advocating for myself, but now that I'm a mom, like I know how to advocate for like my baby first and like me
Right.
second. So I asked him, I said, what's the plan? And he said, well, we're running some tests right now. So I won't really have any definitive answers, but if I had to say, we're going to deliver you before Christmas or Christmas Eve. So it was December 21st, and he said, by Christmas Eve. And I said, okay, so like a couple days, it's not going to be 5 weeks. And it was also kind of a shock, like, okay, that's very, very soon. He said, but it all depends on the test. So I say by that date. It could be earlier than that. It could, and I said, okay, my next question is, I'm hungry. Can I have anything to eat? And he said,
Yes.
I was very hungry. And he said, no, we have to run some tests. We don't know, if we're going to deliver you tonight, tomorrow, early in the morning. We don't know yet. So then I had to wait a couple of hours, like maybe an hour or two, for some tests to be ran. And then I finally asked again. I said, can I have anything? At this point,
You're just begging for food at this point. Like,
it must have been a lot more hours than one or two because it was it was definitely like past midnight at this point. Or like coming up to midnight, but it was very late. And they were like, yeah, we can give you this sandwich because the cafeteria is closed. And I swear this sandwich, and it, even for being as hungry as it was not good at all.
half frozen.
It was, no, it was stale. It was stale and dry. And I swear it was the nurse sitting at the station that was like, the poor pregnant lady needs needs food. Let me give her my sandwich. It wasn't even a full sandwich. It was half of a sandwich. So, okay. They also didn't want me eating a lot because they still didn't know what they were going to do.
Yes, right.
So then Kyle had got there by that point and he was sleeping because he was tired. He woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to go to work, and now it's past midnight. He's tired. He's asleep. And in between, they're still like, so I have my blood pressure cup on. They're monitoring that. I have like the monitors on my belly. I don't know how to read any of it, and I'm not even caring to because I'm trying not to be. I knew that if I'm stressed out about this, that's not good for my blood pressure or my baby. So I'm at the hospital. I'm the best place I can be. So try not to worry. And they did kept coming in and asking me like, "Are you having contractions?" Or no, they said, "Are you feeling contractions?" And I said, "I don't think so, no." But I think I was having contractions because they kept coming in pretty worried, but I didn't feel any. And I wasn't looking at the monitor that told me if I was having it or not.
Yeah,
I
because the
also
little
wasn't feeling
dots
my
hit.
baby kick or hiccup or anything too, so I was kind of worried, but I didn't mention it to anybody because I figured they would know the monitors are on me if the heart rate or anything was like dropping or stopping or anything like that, they would have taken action. So I was like, well, for once, I'm not feeling her move and I'm not like too worried about it because there's monitors on me. So I'll know if something's going wrong or they'll know and then I'll know. So then I tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't because there was just so much going on. I was very tired, but I could not fall asleep. At one point, they come in, they tell me that my C-section is scheduled for the next day and that I'm having my baby the next day. So I was like, okay. So then I told everybody in
Did
my family that
you
knew.
breakfast?
Hmm?
Did they give you breakfast that day?
No, after they told me that I was gonna, so after I had that sandwich, they wouldn't let me eat until they decided what was gonna happen.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't eat until they told me that the next day I would be having my baby.
Okay.
And so I did get to eat one more meal before then, but I wasn't allowed to eat like after that. I think right after they got me some food or had me put in my order or whatever. And then I wasn't allowed to eat anything after that other than like water. I could have like juice, like clear liquids. So you good? Oh,
Yeah, I'm just like thinking, like, because I was so hungry, like my entire pregnant, like after the second trimester, that I just can't imagine like
I
not being
had
able to eat. Like that was also one of my things
I
was
feel
that,
like that's torture to someone that's pregnant. And like I was saying, I like didn't have a
yeah,
big appetite. So, and I couldn't eat very much without feeling full, but man, was I hungry. But after she did flip around to be breech, maybe she was in a different position so then I could finally feel hungry. Maybe she was sitting on my stomach before and compressing it. I don't know.
yeah, because that's one of the reasons I chose the midwifery was because they were like, you can eat and drink as much as you want while you're here. Like, I was
So,
like, good.
so they did also mention that I needed to have an X-ray of my back because I have metal rods in it. So I already knew that I wouldn't be able to have like an epidural for my back, but what they need to do a spinal for a C-section, or
And
at least
still, you
figure out.
couldn't feel contractions.
Well, the other option would be if they couldn't do a spinal, then they'd have to knock me out completely. And I
Okay.
was hoping that they could find somewhere and I could be at least awake. Which now I'm like, maybe I would have wanted to be asleep. But no, I'm very happy that I was awake during it. So they did the x-ray and they had to do another ultrasound to check because my fluid levels were so low. And I'm sure they were checking for other things that they just didn't tell me about.
Do you wish
So
they
they
had
did.
told you?
Honestly, no. I figured if it was, they would tell me if they had to.
Right.
And I knew that the biggest thing, and I'm sure that they didn't tell me things because the biggest thing is like stress. If my blood pressure is already so high and not controlled, and I have preeclampsia at this point, they're not trying to. They want to see when you have preeclampsia. They also are testing like how bad your organs are being damaged by having preeclampsia. It's not just high blood pressure.
Right.
So I'm kind of glad that they didn't tell me a lot because I didn't want to worry and I'm anxious to begin with. So
Yeah. Then
yeah.
that's good that they realized that too. Because
Yeah.
I guess
So
for me, I like information and it helps me
I do
relax
too.
to know
Normally,
information.
normally I would like a lot of information, but in this case I was better
You're
not
like,
to
ignorance
know.
is bliss. That's
Yeah, at
just,
this point because it just is so sudden. I still had 7 weeks to go and it was a lot.
yeah.
I think I was also still in shock for a long time, not just like at that moment, like for a little while. So they told me I needed the x-ray on my back, and I expected that they were going to take me that during that day to like go get an x-ray, but then they had someone actually come up and they set up like a whole x-ray for me where I didn't have to leave my bed. So that was interesting. I was hooked up to a whole bunch of things, and with the medication that I was on, you're not allowed to leave your bed. Like the first thing that they did when I was in the ER at my town's hospital is they had to insert a catheter because you cannot leave your bed once you're on this medication. So then they had the ultrasound person come in, and I asked her like a question like, "Can you tell me how like an estimation of how big my baby's going to be?" Because I had no idea how big a 33-week-old preemie could be or what they look like or anything like that. And she was already measuring small, and she estimated to be like around 3 pounds, 12 ounces, and she couldn't estimate the length or anything because baby's all curled up, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So, and I didn't ask about my fluid levels or anything like that. So then I just stayed up all night, and I was trying not, like, I wanted to Google like 33-week-old preemies, but I also didn't want to scare myself with all the things that could pop up because in those moments, the internet is not your friend.
Yeah.
So
That's horror stories. Yeah.
yeah, so I did not do that, but I was up all night. I couldn't even watch like a show that I was watching at the time. Like to get anything off my mind, I was just not anxious, but it was just like a lot to think about. And it was hard to wrap my head around like usually in labor unless you have like a planned C-section, you don't know when you're going to have your baby. It's kind of like, whatever. So it was weird
Yes.
to think like, okay, I have a time. I know exactly when I'm going to become a mom. Like it was so weird. And I wasn't worried about the C-section either because I had already had a surgery on my spine before, and I had had a surgery on my tendon that I severed in my finger. So I was like, oh, whatever. It is what it is. I wanted a natural birth, but whatever to get my baby here safe. So I stayed up all night. Kyle was blissfully sleeping because men
Yeah.
can do that.
Men can do that.
And he didn't really talk. He seemed excited that we were going to have her and everything like that. He didn't talk about if he was like scared or anything like that. I didn't talk about my fears because I just didn't want to. I was kind of just in my own head. We had like talked while we were there, but not about anything like that.
Yeah.
So then the next day came, and they brought in his scrubs that he had to wear for being in there for the C-section, and he got all ready, and they told me my C-section was at this time, but they actually came and like got me like 30 minutes early because I guess it's a lot of setup, or maybe it was just they could take me earlier. I don't know. So they wheeled me back in my bed or transferred me. I don't even remember this part, to be honest, but I do remember Kyle like being, I think, still waiting at the room. They were going to get him or something like that. And I remember suddenly realizing I've never been awake for any of these surgeries that I've had. So, okay. So I'm like, and I think most of it was also just anxious, like what's going to happen. And they had mentioned that like don't be too concerned if your baby doesn't cry. She's going to be really small and she's so early. Her lungs might not be developed enough. They also did give me a shot. I forgot to mention they gave me a shot. I don't remember if it was it's like a 2-round shot. I think they gave me the first one at my town hospital to like help mature her lungs. It's like a steroid shot.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
they gave me another shot as well. So I think that's why they like honestly I think they would have delivered me a little bit earlier if they could have given me the shot. If they had any like knowing that this was going to happen, I think that my doctor would have given me the shot like earlier, like at my last appointment or something like that. So they did have to wait. The doctor did tell me that's why they waited, else they would have delivered me a little bit earlier, but they needed me to have that other shot before they could deliver. So I go in and they like transfer me to like the operating table, and they tell me to like bend over as far as I can, and I can't bend. I have rods in my back. I cannot bend. They're like just kind of lean over as far as you can onto this old nice nurse. And so I did, and then I asked, I was like, okay, just let me know when you're gonna start. And he was like, I already did it, like it's in. And I was like, I did not feel a single thing at all. I figured I would at least feel like a bee sting or a
Yeah,
prick
of
or
course. Right.
something. I didn't feel anything, but my back
Is
also.
your pain tolerance pretty high?
my pain tolerance is very high.
Yeah.
But I also, my back is numb. If you like to the touch, I don't have like nerves there from when I had my surgery. So that
Mm-hmm.
might have something to do with it, that I didn't feel it like go into my skin, you know? So I don't know. Then they told me to lay down, so I laid down. I met my anesthesiologist. He was like right at my head, and they had the curtain drape. They had the curtain drape thingy, and in my memory, it's clear.
I've never seen it clear in any
Never. I
movies
pictured
or
a
TV
a
shows or
blue
anything like
one.
that.
That's what I pictured, like the blue ones, you know? So it was a
Yeah.
little weird. So I'm just staring up at the ceiling because now I'm starting to feel my body is getting numb. And now I'm having a panic attack about like, oh my God, I can't feel my legs, which obviously you want to not feel when someone's cutting you open, but I think it was more like I was so anxious about my baby, but
I
my
I actually
brain was
looked at
telling me to
and
focus
it's like
on something
a
else.
it's called locked in phobia. So like there's locked in syndrome where people can't move their arms and legs but they can
Hmm.
like think and stuff. But there's
Hmm.
like a phobia of like being in that situation. It sounds
Yes.
like you had that phobia.
You literally felt like I was paralyzed, and that had never been a fear of mine before, but now it certainly is because I did not like not being able to feel my body. I was numb. They had to numb me so high that I was numb all the way up to like my collarbones. I knew my arms existed, and if I really tried, I could move them, but for the
Hmm.
most part, like anything else, I could not feel anything. I told myself to try and move my leg just to see if I could, and didn't even feel that I had legs. As far as I knew, I
I'm getting
didn't have
chills from
any.
that feeling. I
So
couldn't handle that.
it was so but I think my mind was trying to, maybe it's an actual fear of mine, but even thinking about it now, I do not like the feeling of being paralyzed, basically. Um, yeah, it was
I don't think
awful.
anybody does. I don't want to be like people
No,
love feeling like
no,
that.
no, I don't think so. But like, I didn't think about that at all. Like when I wanted to like give birth, like I would have considered an epidural if it was possible. Like I was never
Hmm.
against anything like that. But I didn't like, I knew it numbed you like to not feel contractions and stuff, but I did not realize how. I thought I would feel like maybe like when you get your tooth like filled for a cavity and you can like kind of feel when you touch it. I could
Yeah.
not feel them touching me at all. Like it was, I expected like the tingles, you know, or just feeling
Hmm.
puffy or, but not feeling any pain. No, I could not, I did not know I had legs. And I couldn't,
Oh, wow.
like, if I was looking up and I started to have a
Good.
panic attack, and Kyle came in at one point and they were right when they were about to start. And the anesthesiologist leans down to me and I have my eyes closed. I knew that Kyle was next to me because I could hear him, and I think I looked at him for a second and then I closed my eyes again. I was just trying to think about anything else. And the anesthesiologist, he leans over and he's like, I gave you something to like ease your anxiety. It'll kick in a second. So I don't know if maybe he like does that to everybody or if he could really tell because my eyes weren't open. I wasn't
He's like, here's some
responding to anybody.
Prozac.
I don't know what they gave me, but it did not work. I was so anxious. And I think they thought I was anxious about like the surgery and my baby and stuff, and I was, but no, it was more like I can't feel my legs, and I do
Yeah.
not like this at all. Um,
I
and
can't
then I
believe
hear,
they gave you a clear sheet because, from my
well, then I
understanding,
hear
there's so
Kyle
many
say,
layers.
so
Yeah.
Kyle had already known like you're gonna film this whole thing because I'm probably gonna like not like I want to remember these moments, okay? And then I hear Kyle say, "Is that the? Do I smell burning flesh?" And I wanted
Terrible.
to like I wanted to laugh, but also I couldn't. Like I was just so in my head. I've had panic attacks before, but this was like the worst panic attack I have ever felt. And he probably knew because my blood pressure was probably way higher than it was 5 seconds ago. Like the anesthesiologist. Then it felt really fast. All of a sudden they say, look at your baby. And I'm like trying to look up. But I also don't want to because I forgot to mention there's 1,010,000 people in my room.
Yeah.
And right when it started kicking in the spinal and the numbness and everything, I was like I had my hospital gown on, but like they had opened it before I even felt numb and like put up the screen and stuff. And there's a ton of people in the room. They had two NICU teams. They had like nurses. They had two. I had two OB like OB doctors operating on me for my C-section, and then they had told me that they had asked for my okay to have like people watch as well. So there was a ton of people, and
So
it
many
was just
people.
it was so much, and all I was like, I'm like naked. They could see everything, and I'm sure they covered that part of me after they had like put up a drape and everything, but it was the weirdest feeling. And then they told me to look up at my baby, and I tried to look up, but I was also anxious, and I was like, okay. So I looked up, and I was like, oh. But I was not in my mind. I couldn't like really see her. I just said, oh, and then they took her away, or no, then they asked Kyle to cut the umbilical cord, and he did. And then they took her away really fast, and he followed her because he knew to do that. And he got some videos of her while they like weighed her and everything, and then they bundled her up really quickly. He brought her like to me, but he was standing a little bit too far. Like he should have been here, and he was like here. And that's not going to make
You
sense to
couldn't.
anybody that's not watching a video, but he was a little bit behind my eye, like my eyesight. So I tried the best I could to like move my head and like look, and all the blankets like covering her face pretty much. I can't see her. And they're like, we need to take her now. And Kyle was originally supposed to go to the NICU with her, but they told him that they would come and get him when she was ready to be seen. So he stayed with me, which at this point I was like, okay, I'm not too mad about that because I'm still having a panic attack here. And they're still like, doing whatever they have to do. I also forgot to mention that she did cry. They had mentioned that she might be too small to cry, but she did cry, so that was like the best sound ever. Then when they were done like sewing me up and everything, and they took me back to the same labor and delivery room I was in before, and they had already, when I had got there, they had like the whole baby set up for when you are delivering a baby, but they had taken that out while I was gone because that that
Because
would have
they
been like
realized that you
that would have
weren't
been
going to
really
be able to
hard
make
for
it.
me because
Yeah.
I haven't even like met my baby, held my baby, anything like that. And then there's a reminder right there that my baby
Yeah.
should be right
An
there.
empty crib.
So, but then seeing that it was gone, like they should have taken it out before they even put me in that room, to be honest. But obviously they didn't think about that or whatever. But to see it then gone was also a reminder that like my baby wasn't in the room with me. So it was a lot. So I got back to the room, and I was, calling my dad and updating people like, oh, she was born at this time. I don't know how much she weighs at this point. I don't know how long she is. I have no information about her. But here's some pictures that Kyle got. And I was looking at the pictures, and I was like, wait, Kyle, does she only have 4 toes? Like, I swear I'll love her no matter what, but does she only have 4 toes? And then he looked at me funny, and he had the phone. He took the phone from me, and he said, "Hold on, give me a second." And I was like, "Okay." And then he comes back a couple of minutes later, and he's like, "Wait, I figured it out. Her toes were just like crisscrossed behind each other." Because then he told me because her umbilical cord was wrapped around both of her feet were blue. So I had a fear the whole time I was pregnant that her umbilical cord was going to like get wrapped around her neck or something like that. Sorry, I'm recovering from a sickness still. Around her neck or something. So my intuition was right in a sense, but thank God it was just her feet.
Yeah.
Her toes still haven't evened out though. But on all her footprints, she only had 4 toes. Um, so that was different. And then he ended up stepping out of the room to like call his family and do whatever he had to do. And I was just in the room by myself for a few minutes, and it was so lonely. I remember feeling like empty. Like obviously my baby's no longer inside of me, and I've carried her for 33 weeks, and it it was just I felt all I wanted was to see my baby, and nobody had come in yet at this point to like tell me how much she weighs, how she's doing, when I can see her, and I'm still numb at this point, so I can't like go get up on my
Go
own
get up.
either.
Yeah.
So I'm just alone, and then before Kyle comes back, someone comes in to like talk to me about like pumping, telling me that I need to learn how to pump, and this is and they're teaching me, and and I'm doing everything that they're saying, but all I can think is like this is the last thing I want to do at this moment. Like I'd rather be meeting my baby, holding my baby, whatever. But I still had to pump and all that, and obviously I wanted to do whatever I could for her to like give her milk and stuff. And then they asked
So what day was she officially born? December.
December 23rd. at 1:05 p.m., weighing 3 pounds, 15 ounces, 17 inches long.
Now we're excited to welcome our husbands to tell their side of our birth stories.
I'm Kyle. I'm Melody's husband. Right around lunch, maybe right after lunch, I get a call that the doctor's appointment didn't go amazing to a degree, and that she was going to get flown to Montana. So they're the only people with the capabilities for a 33-week pregnancy. They have the NICU equipment to handle it all. I was a little worried because the whole reason why is because of her super high blood pressure already, and it was like crazy numbers I'd never seen before. Even then, like at the hospital when she got there, it was still like 245 over something. I was like, whoa. I'm just like worried for my wife, you know.
Can I ask you a question, Bill?
Yeah.
When they said that I was going to have her at 33 weeks, did you have any like fears about her, like, and how her health would be?
A little. You know, I'm like, well, knowing we were at the place that could handle that early for the most part was really relieving.
Okay.
Like 1 o'clock, I think, is the actual operation. They wheel her in on the gurney for operating on. Everyone's super cool. Anesthesiologist is super cool. Everything's going fine. It was such a beautiful moment when I got to hold her. I got to snip the cord. That was cool.
Cool. That is
Just
cool.
a nice.
I was when it came time to snip the cord for Ad, but I was
Okay.
already I was out of the tub because the tub was gross, right? Like it's just gross. So I, like, after the baby was born, I passed the baby off. I hopped out of the tub and went and took a quick shower to rinse it all off of me so I could come out clean. And
Yeah,
during
that's that.
time-
That afterbirth.
That's that amniotic
I was like, I can't.
fluid and blood and maybe some poop, and
Yeah.
No, she was a
all of the
lucky one.
above.
She didn't get to poop.
she didn't get to
No,
poop.
she
Oh,
didn't.
okay.
Not
Okay.
not a full poop. She might have.
So
she might have had a
just
little bit of
amniotic
poop, but-
fluid and blood,
Yeah,
right?
basically, yeah. Because that was my biggest concern, dude. I think if she would have pooped, I think I would have been out.
You're like,
I
I'm
don't know.
out. Sorry.
I have a weird thing with poop. Like fecal matter is like the most bacterial. Like I can't do it. I'm like, no
It
poop.
sounds like you guys are the same person.
Did we just become best friends?
I'm Jason. I'm Maddie's husband, and I'm gonna be telling my perspective of her birth and our story. It started pretty late the night before, which would have been August 28th. Probably 8:30, 9 o'clock. She started having irregular contractions, so they were a little worse than usual, but not bad enough to call the doctor because we'd done that before too. So
Right.
I was sleeping through the night and occasionally checking on her and getting texts from her about how far apart her contractions were. And come that morning, it was like, 5:30 in the morning, and they were getting pretty bad and pretty intense. And I was like, well, okay. And I text my boss and I said, I'm pretty sure today's the day, so I'm not coming in. And we hung out with her until we had instructions on when to call the midwife. And it was like contractions were pretty close together, maybe like 10 to 20 minutes apart, to call the midwife and go in there and start going in. So we called the midwife probably it was like 6:50 when we called them, and they were like, okay, well, come on in if you think you need to come in, and we'll go from there. So we drove over to the midwifery and sat in the labor room, and we were probably there for a couple hours till 9-10 o'clock. And then the midwife was like, well, you still having semi-normal contractions. I'm gonna check your dilation and see how dilated you are. And so she starts checking. She's like, maybe you're probably maybe 4 or 5 centimeters dilated. And then she checks, and she was 8 centimeters dilated. And she was like, oh, okay, you're not kidding. Like, this is, you're being real. And Eddie's like, yeah, okay. She's like, I just don't know why your water hasn't broken yet. And she's like, I'm kind of getting ready to send you guys back home. And Eddie was like, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And she goes to the bathroom, and she goes to pee, and she goes, my water just broke. And so I was kind of like, oh, isn't that funny? Like, you were getting ready to send us home, and her water breaks. So what does that tell you about that? And it was like, okay, cool. So we started getting the tub filled up, getting towels, getting everything prepared. And that was maybe, 10:30, rolling on 11 o'clock. And we got in the tub. Addie got in the tub. I sat next to the tub for a while, letting her get acclimated and comfortable. And primarily to a point where she actually needed help, not to just take up her space and make it something that was, less about her, because it was all about her. There were a couple of big, like, screams that were, like, guttural, that you could just feel all of the energy and all of the pain, but at the same time you could see all of the beauty. And it was through those where the breathing techniques and having a birth plan really came into a prepared effect, and that was something that made a large difference. So then moving to the actual birth of the baby in the tub, 15 minutes before, probably not even that, 5 minutes, 3 minutes before she came out, the midwife had me put my hand down, and I could feel her head, and just the top noggin of her head, and I just basically, like, got a handful of hair, and I was just like, oh man, she's got a hairy head already. And then her coming out, and I actually caught her in the water, and caught her and passed her up kind of through Addie's legs to the midwife's arms, and that was really cool. Now after the baby was born, I had a big scare, and it's something that still kind of takes my breath away to this day, but Addie had a really bad hemorrhage after the baby was born. She was just in this state of pure bliss. Like, not a single thing in the world could happen at that moment to upset the way that she felt after giving birth.
What was going through your head in that moment when you saw her hemorrhaging? Like, what were you feeling?
So immediately, I'm looking around to make sure that the people who are supposed to be reacting and responding are doing so. Because in a situation like that, any hesitation can be life-threatening, and that's just how it is. So the immediate thing I did is I kind of looked around to stay out of the way so they can do their job. And then when given the opportunity, I went up and I asked if there was anything I could do to help. And the nurse there just said, pray, just say your prayers. And to me, I'm someone who very much likes to help. And if it's even the smallest of tasks, like let me help, like, that's totally fine. And so to hear that, it was like, oh shit, okay, what do I do? I can't really do anything. And, on one hand, a beautiful love just was born into this world, but I don't want to see one go away. So I stepped outside at that moment. I was like, well, I'll just flag down the EMTs when they pull in the parking lot so they know where to go. And I'll see, I can only do what I can do. And the people inside can only do what they can do. So EMTs pulled in, I flagged them over to where we were. The two guys with the gurney were waiting outside, and the big guy goes past and he goes, hey, don't worry, man, I had my baby here, it's all good, I trust these guys, we'll get it taken care of. And I appreciated that to my core, because it was just really worrisome as a father. I was very, very, very concerned. but just trying to keep it together. And they went in, and I was talking to the midwife nurse, the certified nursing midwife, and she was like, if the bleeding doesn't stop soon, like really really soon, she's going on the gurney and she's going to the hospital. And she's like, you might have well just planned on her going to the hospital. And so I was like, okay. So I started packing stuff up, and it got to the point of where EMTs showed up, and one EMT who's pretty big goes in, and basically, Addie's like, he punched me in the stomach, kinda, because he just shoves his hand into her stomach, to get her uterus to stop bleeding. In the last, probably 30 to 60 seconds before they would have been like, all right, put her on the gurney, she stopped bleeding, and the EMT was like, all right, well, she stopped bleeding. We've got that under control. Her heart rate's back to normal. She seems okay. She's not bleeding anymore. We're not going to take her to the hospital. She's okay. She's okay to stay here. But you guys have to stay here. We basically had to stay there for another 8 to 10 hours or something. A pretty long time to keep an eye on Addie with how much blood she had lost. But that whole situation was really scary, because you have worst case scenario flash through your brain, and if you can't separate that from reality, then you can go down in a state of panic, and if you can avoid that, then you can save something, you can do something, you can keep yourself from becoming one who needs help and be one who's able to help.
Thanks for listening to Nurturing Tiny Hearts, and remember, this is a safe, judgment-free space. We celebrate all parenting styles and choices.
Before you go, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Your support helps us reach more parents like you who are on this wild ride with us.
And remember, in the chaos of parenting, don't forget to carve out a moment for yourself. You deserve it.
Until next time, take care and keep nurturing those tiny hearts.